Hey there, friends. Welcome to a spine-chilling adventure on the high seas. Here, we explore the scariest stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. To keep this channel growing, I'm begging you to subscribe and like this video. Your support truly motivates me. And don't forget to comment about where you're listening from. I'm curious to know your haunted locations. I have something special just for you. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie in abandoned places? Today, I'm taking you on a journey to a ghost ship lost in the ocean. As I tell you my story, I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment below. But wait, there's more. If you're looking to shed some pounds without lifting a finger, I got a weight loss dietary supplement that works wonders. Even while you sleep, click the link in the description below to learn more and discover how easy it can be to reach your goals. Now, grab your life jackets and let's dive into the eerie tale of the ghost ship. I found myself on a crude ship, sailing across the vast blue ocean. One day, we stumbled upon a derelict ship, old and ghostly, floating silently under the moonlight. As I stepped onto the creaking deck, a chill ran down my spine. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, and I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me. Inside, we discovered signs of a violent struggle. Broken furniture, scattered belongings, and eerie whispers echoing through the empty halls. But where were the crew? It was as if they had vanished into thin air. As night fell, strange things began to happen on our ship. I heard footsteps behind me when no one was there, and I caught glimpses of shadowy figures darting just out of sight. The wind howled, carrying with it the faint cries of those lost at sea, and I could feel their sorrow seeping into my bones. The atmosphere grew heavier, and my heart raced with fear. One by one, my crewmates began to act strangely, as if the ghosts of the abandoned vessel had taken hold of them. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder one night, and when I turned around, there was nothing there, just the dark ocean stretching endlessly. As the days passed, I realized we were not alone. The spirits of the ship were restless, and they wanted something from us. I had to uncover the truth behind the ghost ship before it was too late. My heart raced as I moved deeper into the ghost ship. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering in the dim light from my flashlight. The air was thick with moisture, and the distant sound of dripping water echoed, like a countdown to something terrible. I could feel a sense of dread wrapping around me, like a heavy fog. I stepped cautiously, my footsteps sounding too loud in the eerie silence. Suddenly, I noticed strange markings on the walls, scratched deep into the wood. It looked like words or maybe names. I leaned closer to get a better look, feeling a chill creep down my spine. The words were jagged, as if someone had used fingernails instead of a tool. I tried to make sense of them, but the more I stared, the more I felt that they were alive, like they had a story that was begging to be told. It was then that a loud crash echoed from the hold below, sending my heart leaping into my throat. I turned and shouted for my crewmates, but my voice only echoed back at me. The deeper I went, the heavier the atmosphere felt. I could hardly breathe. I reached a door that was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, I was hit by a wave of cold air. Inside, the sight made my stomach turn. There were remnants of a dinner table, plates and cups overturned, as if a feast had suddenly turned to chaos. In the dim light, I could see what looked like old, dried blood smeared across the table. I gasped softly, trying to hold back panic. I pictured the crew at the table, laughing and eating, then suddenly screaming. Just as I was about to back away, I heard faint laughter, soft, haunting, and chilling. It echoed just beyond the doorframe. It was not human, but it was close. I held my breath, my body frozen in place, as I listened closely. It seemed to be teasing me, drawing me in. I hesitated, but curiosity pushed me forward. I stepped cautiously into the next room, where I found myself enveloped in darkness, my flashlight flickering ominously. Suddenly, the light went out completely, leaving me in pitch black. My heart hammered in my chest. I fumbled with the flashlight, desperately trying to turn it back on as shadows swirled around me. I thought I heard whispering, just at the edge of hearing, soft, mournful words that wrapped around me like a shroud. Then right in front of me, something moved. I felt a rush of cold air, like a whisper of a breeze, but it didn't feel natural. I gasped and swung my flashlight around, illuminating only a wall of darkness. Nothing but the sound of my own breathing. The whispers stopped, and a heavy silence filled the space, almost as if the ghostly presence was watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. Panic surged through me. I turned and stumbled back towards the door I had just come through. But as I reached for the handle, I felt an icy grip around my wrist, tightening painfully. I screamed, pulling away, but the grip only intensified, dragging me backward into the darkness. I felt my heart race faster. Whatever was behind me wanted to pull me into its abyss. In a wild gasp of adrenaline, I managed to break free and flung myself towards the door. I burst out into the hallway, breathing hard, clutching my flashlight like it was my lifeline. I knew I had to get back to my crewmates. I turned to run, but as I did, I noticed something. It was not just shadows moving, but shapes. Figures floated in the corners of my vision, their outlines barely visible. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was seeing things, but they were still there. Glimpses of faces, eyes hollow and filled with despair, watching me with an expression I could not read. Fear, anger, or sadness. I couldn't tell. The air felt heavy with their presence, and I was suddenly overwhelmed by the urge to escape. I raced down the corridor, dodging the shadows that seemed to reach for me. With every step, I could hear the whispers escalating, as if they were trying to get my attention. "Help us," one voice pleaded, echoing back to me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had to find my crewmates before it was too late. Just then, I heard a loud bang from above, followed by a crash that shook the ship. I ducked instinctively, wondering if the ship was coming apart. I pressed on, desperate to reach the deck. The open ocean awaited, but my friends were still missing. I burst out the door and took a deep breath, ready to call out to them, but all that met me was silence. Where were they? The moonlight bathed the deck in an eerie glow, casting long shadows that danced like spirits. I called out their names, my voice swallowed by the night. As I listened intently, the silence was suddenly broken by the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned sharply, my heart pounding. I was alone, or so I thought. There they were, my crewmates, standing at the edge of the ship, staring blankly into the water, their expressions blank and hollow. "What are you doing?" I shouted, but they didn't respond. My stomach dropped as I approached them, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Whatever had happened to this ghost ship was now gripping my friends, and I felt the icy grip of fear creeping back. Without warning, one of them turned slowly, eyes wide and unfocused, mouth open in a silent scream. A wave of terror washed over me as I stepped back, unsure of what I was seeing. Another crewmate followed suit, a blank look on her face, as if the life had been drained from her. "What's wrong with you?" I whispered, feeling the weight of despair pressing on my chest. The wind picked up, swirling around us like a living entity, carrying with it the distant cries of souls trapped at sea. I realized then that we weren't just facing ghostly apparitions. We were part of something much darker, something that would not let us go. I felt a pull towards the edge of the ship, an invisible force compelling me to join my friends in staring into the abyss of the ocean. "Stay back!" I yelled, panic rising, but my voice seemed to vanish into the dark. I took a step forward, reaching for my friends, but they were slipping away, lost in the depths of the ship's dark curse. I had to break them free somehow. I grappled with my fear, the shadows closing in around me, suffocating. I was losing them, and I couldn't let that happen. Just as I grasped the nearest crewmate's hand, a cold wave crashed over the ship, spraying salty water in my face. The side of the ocean twisted beneath us, churning as if alive. I stumbled back, and the next thing I knew, a powerful force pulled me toward the edge. Desperately, I dug my heels into the wooden deck, using every ounce of strength to hold myself back. Above the roaring waves, I heard a voice. It was the same voice that had beckoned me earlier. "Join us! Join us!" The voice was sultry, laced with sorrow and despair. I felt its pleat deep within me, wrapping around my heart like a vine ready to choke me. My mind raced with confusion and fear. This was not a comforting voice, but a sinister invitation that chilled my bones. I wrestled with the terrifying thought of what lay beneath us, the dark waters that held so many secrets of the lost crew. As I pulled harder at my friend's hand, the other crew members' eyes began to reflect something otherworldly, a vacant gaze that seemed to pierce through me. They stood like statues, bodies swaying gently with the ship's rocking, as if they were part of the vessel itself. "Get away from there!" I shouted, panic rising within like a swell at sea. They wouldn't respond. It was as if they were trapped between worlds, held captive by the ship's sinister grip. As the wind howled around us, I realized I had to do something drastic, or we would all be consumed by whatever force held my friends. I remembered the markings I had seen below deck, the scratched words begging for help. The thought sparked inside me like a match. Maybe they were all connected. Maybe those souls wanted to be freed. My pulse quickened as I stepped back from the edge, heart pounding with determination. I turned to the crewmates, standing lifeless at the edge. "Listen to me!" I yelled with all the strength I could muster. "You have to fight whatever is trying to take you. You are not just spirits trapped here. You're my friends." The sea roared below us, and for a moment, they seemed to flicker, their faces almost shifting back to something more human. But then the powerful wind howled again, and the ocean surged, crashing against the ship as if trying to claim us for itself. "Join us," the voice whispered again, but this time it was filled with desperation, tinged with anger. I felt a twinge of fear as I realized the ship was alive, probably feeding off our fear and sorrow. "Step away from the edge," I cried, desperate to reach them. I took a few tentative steps forward, feeling the pull of the ocean and the ship's malevolent energy all around me. I had to awaken them, to remind them of who they were. "Remember the sun on your face. Remember our laughter. You are not just shadows." As I called to them, the atmosphere shifted. The darkness around us began to pulse and shift, the shadows stretching toward me in hungry waves. I could hear whispers growing louder, a cacophony of voices swirling around like a storm. "Help us, free us, join us," they cried in an unsettling harmony. The sound was both beautiful and horrific, and I felt myself teeter on the edge of fear. In that moment, something snapped inside me. I couldn't let this be the end. I dropped to my knees on the deck, clutching the wood, and poured out my heart in a desperate plea. "You are alive. Fight. Fight it." Each word felt like a lifeline cast into the darkness, and I could feel a shift in the air, a flicker of hope. My friends' eyes seemed to regain a flicker of life, their expressions momentarily transforming from hollow to confused. For a heartbeat, time seemed to pause, and I thought we would break free from the grip of despair. But just as hope blossomed, a violent breeze swept across the deck, knocking me off balance. The voices surged, and I looked back to see shadows reaching toward me, clawing and grasping. They were angry now, furious that I had dared to disrupt their hold. "Get back!" I shouted again, feeling my heart race. I had to protect myself and my friends. Even as they stood in a trance, I refused to abandon them. I knew I needed to disrupt the energy flow of the ship. I recalled the markings that begged for help. They were a last plea from those trapped here. I stood up, gaining strength from that realization, and bolted back through the shadows. I darted back inside the ship, my flashlight flickering ominously in the darkness. The laughter from before echoed again, but now it had an undercurrent of malice. I dashed through the corridor, guided by a desperate need to break the spell. As I reached that room, I felt the presence of something watching me closely. The energy pulsed like a heartbeat, filling the air with static. I steadied my breath and focused on the unsettling markings. I traced my fingers over the scratches, feeling a surge of energy as I muttered the words aloud. It was a gamble, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Suddenly, the room trembled and the walls creaked, a low hum growing in intensity around me. The shadows shifted violently, swirling in a frenzy as if agitated by my actions. I felt something pull at me, a sharp tug on my consciousness that made me dizzy. My feet were planted firmly, determination flooding my veins as I fought against the force. Then I let out a primal scream. "You will not take us? We are strong. We are alive." The words spilled from me, rising higher above the chaos. The shadows twisted, forming into tormented faces, faces that seemed to cry out for freedom. And then, the blue light of truth flickered hot and bright, illuminating the room like 1,000 fallen stars. I realized I could shape this energy, bending it with my will. I focused all my thoughts on my friends, imagining them alive, laughing together in the sunlight. As I directed the light toward the scratches on the wall, the words began to glow, almost alive. The ship shuddered violently, and outside, waves crashed against the sides. I could hear the ocean screaming, angry and wild, as if it was resisting my efforts. "Let them go!" I shouted, framing my thoughts with pure, unyielding hope. The very essence of the ship seemed to scream in anger, a soul trapped and bound by pain. I pushed through the despair, willing my light to consume the shadows. The energy roared and alive, smashing against the oppressive dark, as if a battle was raging between light and shadow. With each breath, I released my fear and poured out my heart, screaming raw truths that I hoped would break the chains binding my friends. I felt the swell of energy grow, pulling against the cold grasp of the shadows. I could feel the presence of the ship recoiling, fighting against my defiance. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the corner of my eye, one of my crewmates. She was frozen, her eyes wide and filled with tears, reaching out but not quite able to cross the threshold. "Help us," she whispered, and I felt my throat tighten. The ship raged around me, and I sensed time was running out. "Don't give up," I yelled, unwilling to let darkness snatch her away. The blue energy flooded the room, illuminating the terrified faces of my friends. I extended my hand to her, urging her to reach back. The shadows screeched, surging forward, but I refused to retreat. "I'm here. You're not alone," I cried, frustration fueling my strength. Feeling every word resonate through me as if the truth could pierce the darkness. The air shimmered, and I could see them wavering, flickering between two worlds. And then, as though the universe itself had heard my plea, the shadows writhed and cracked, the cries from every soul torturing this ship echoing around me. I felt a terrible force being unleashed, and with it came the realization that this ghost ship was a vessel of pain, caught in a cycle between life and the beyond. "Let it go!" I screamed again, summoning every ounce of will I had left. And then, as if responding to my words, the air shimmered and surged around me like a tornado of light and shadow. My voice broke through the chaos, and the moment of connection surged outwards, a pulse rippling through the ship. I could see the entrance of light forming at the end of the corridor, an escape route. My friends were coming back to life before my eyes, color returning to their faces as they began to step forward. But just then, the darkness lashed out, furious at my defiance. I felt a chilling hand grip my ankle, pulling me back. The remaining shadows swarmed me, attempting to swallow my light. I gritted my teeth, fighting against it, desperate to reach the light with my friends, but feeling the cold deepening the shadows around me. "Stay together," I shouted, the urgency pouring like fire through my veins. I extended my arms as the swirling energy began to lift my friends, pulling them toward me. Their eyes were filled with life once more, and slowly they reached out, grasping for my hands. I felt their fingers brush against mine, warmth breaking through the icy grip of shadows. I pulled with all my might, feeling the surge of energy between us. "Don't let go," I shouted, squeezing their hands tightly. The light at the end of the corridor pulsed, beckoning us like a lighthouse in the storm. The shadows, however, weren't giving up easily. They writhed and snapped around my legs, threatening to drag me back into darkness. I could feel the echo of lost souls swirling violently, their cries blending with the wailing wind. Every ounce of my being screamed to hold on, not just for myself, but for my friends. As we inched closer to the light, the air thickened, suffocating and damp. I glanced back to see the faces of my crewmates flickering in and out of focus, their eyes filled with determination and fear. "We can do this!" I yelled, my voice barely breaking through the chaotic noise trying to drown us. Each step toward the light felt like pushing against a rushing tide, but I could feel the warmth growing, encouraging me to fight harder. Suddenly, the ceiling creaked ominously, and I braced myself as debris began falling around us. The ship was angry, and it was fighting back with everything it had. "Keep moving," I urged, feeling the walls close in, suffocating as the shadows roared in fury. I could sense the desperation behind them. They didn't want to lose their prey again. We could be their next victims if we faltered. As we neared the threshold, I felt a cold rush, like icy fingers trailing along my spine. I turned to see shadows coiling behind us, forming into a monstrous, dark figure that seemed to reach for us with endless tendrils. The sight sent a chill through me, and panic surged harder than ever. "Run!" I yelled, and we bolted forward, adrenaline pushing us onwards. The figure howled in frustration, the sound vibrating through the air like a thunderclap. Just before we reached the light, one of my friends stumbled, pulled by the malevolent force. I turned in horror. "No! Grab onto something!" I screamed, lunging back. The icy grip of the shadow was tightening around her, drawing her back into a swirl of despair and darkness. I felt helpless. I couldn't let her go. "Hold my hand!" I yelled, reaching out towards her. She looked back, fear etched across her face, but there was a spark of defiance in her eyes. "I won't let go," she shouted back, though I could see the struggle within her. Despite the shadows thrumming with fury, we were bound by a connection too strong to be severed. I took a step closer, heart pounding as the shadows clawed at my ankles, trying to drag me down too. Church bells echoed in my mind, a reminder of a different life. The images of sunlit days spent on the shore took shape, pushing me forward through the chaos. "Remember," I called, grasping her hand tighter. "We can't let them have us. We can't let them win." In that moment, something shifted. The light beyond us flickered like a heartbeat. My other crewmates joined in, leaning back as the shadows writhed. Their voices united. A roar of determination broke free, filling the air with warmth and purpose. "We're stronger together," they echoed, pushing against the cold grip of despair. The dark figure hesitated, flickering for a moment as if taken aback by our united voices. We pressed forward, pulling against the unyielding grip of darkness. "This is our moment," I shouted, eyes locked on the light that was now blindingly bright. The tendrils recoiled slightly, trying to retreat from the brilliance emanating from within our combined energy. In one final, desperate pull, I yanked my friend towards the light, and with her, my other crewmates followed, reaching out with fierce determination. The light embraced us as we crossed the threshold, enveloping us in warmth that melted the shadows away. But the dark figure wasn't finished. It lunged, swirling toward us with a vengeance. The shadows became a tempest, spinning violently as I felt its chilling breath against my skin. Just as it seemed ready to take us back, the light exploded outward, a brilliant wave that shattered through the darkness. I shielded my eyes, feeling the fierce energy wash over me, pushing the shadows back into the abyss from which they came. I heard the wails of lost souls echoing, trapped in a cycle of pain and suffering. Yet, we were freed. When the brightness faded, I found myself on the deck of the ship, my friend sprawled beside me, gasping for breath. The ocean shimmered under the moonlight, calm and serene as if the chaos had never happened. I blinked, confusion washing over me. The ship felt different now, alive in a way that was no longer sinister. With trembling hands, I searched around nervously, half expecting the shadows to return, but they were gone. "We made it," I gasped, overwhelmed with relief, but the victory felt shallow. I looked at my friends. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to relief. "What just happened?" one of them asked, still catching their breath, eyes wide searching for an answer. We faced it," I replied, my voice shaky. "But we're free now. We need to get off this ship." A heavy silence filled the air. The dark mystery lingered, echoing in the back of my mind. The ship, now stripped of its malevolence, felt like a haunted husk. A collection of memories and echoes cling, ing to the walls. Yet, as I stood, my heart still raced. I sensed that something had been unleashed, a bond forged between us, the ghosts we faced, and the ship itself. There was a debt left unpaid, a lingering presence that tangled within my heart, reminding me of those who could not break free. As I regrouped, I felt the air shift behind us. I turned slowly, feeling the chill crawl on my skin. In the shadows of the deck, there was a flicker, a movement that caught my eye. I squinted into the dark, my heart pounding as unease crept back into my chest. Something was there, something watching. "Did you see that?" I whispered, glancing back at my friends. They nodded, a shared understanding of fear rebirthing between us. "We should go," one of my friends urged, a tremor in her voice. We turned to run towards the stairs that would take us below deck. But as we moved, I felt a cold breeze wrap around my ankles, halting me in my tracks. "No, we have to find out," I said, a curiosity tugging at my heart. What lay just beyond our sight? What secrets were buried in the shadows? They hesitated, casting uncertain glances, but I couldn't let fear dictate our fate again. We needed answers. I stepped forward, beckoning them to follow, my heart pounding wildly against my ribs. The eerie flicker fluttered again, a whisper of movement that beckoned me. The shadows swirled lazily, congenial yet foreboding. "We're not done yet," I murmured, feeling a fierce determination swelling inside me. We moved cautiously into the darkness, leaving the safety of the moonlight behind. The air thickened with each step, and the silence felt heavy, as if the ship was holding its breath. I could feel the energy crackle around us, a mixture of fear and anticipation coursing through the atmosphere as we ventured deeper into the old vessel. With every shadow we crossed, I felt the pulse of the ship resonating through the boards beneath my feet. It wasn't just a ship, it was a living thing, a prison of memories stifled by darkness. I needed to understand why it had fought against us so desperately. I could still hear the whispers echoing through the emptiness, calling and pleading. "Stay close," I instructed, glancing over my shoulder at my friends. Their faces were ghostly pale, but they nodded, staying near. I led the way, my flashlight cutting through the shadows that swallowed us like an insatiable beast. We found ourselves in a small room, its walls lined with remnants of lives once lived, quantities of charred wood, rusted tools, and remnants of forgotten meals. Old photographs hung crookedly, images of smiling faces that seemed to watch us with vacant eyes. It was a confounding juxtaposition, so much joy trapped in darkness. I stepped deeper inside, drawn in by a force I couldn't quite explain, and there in the corner, I found an old trunk, dust layered thickly on its surface. Yet something about it felt alive, throbbing with a hidden energy. As I approached, I could feel the weight of the ship bearing down on me, the air tinged with an apprehensive weight. "Maybe we shouldn't," one friend whispered, glancing from the trunk to the door as if expecting shadowy figures to emerge. But curiosity overshadowed caution, and I knelt before the chest, my heartbeat echoing in the silence. Slowly, I reached for the latch, a shiver racing down my spine at the thought of what lay inside. With a deep breath, I snapped it open, and the hinges creaked like spirits awoken from a deep slumber. Inside lay a jumble of items, a diary, a decrepit photograph, and worn bits of cloth. My fingers brushed over the diary, the leather cracked and peeling. It felt as if I held the key to the ship's tragic past. As I flipped it open, my breath caught. Words spilled from the pages, shaky and frantic, describing the crew's last days, a battle against darkness, betrayal, and loss. They were echoing their truth, begging to be heard even after all this time. The final entry sent a chill through my bones, detailing a desperate plan to bind their souls to the ship, hoping to protect others from the fate they had suffered. I read the final words, the haunted plea of a ghost now on its last tether. If you find this, break the cycle. Set us free. As I absorbed the weight of those words, the shadows moved closer, forming a barrier around us. They felt heavier, hostile, as if they knew their hold was weakened. The sorrow wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, straining against the air we breathed. "Help us!" The voice came again, echoing from the edges of the room. The weight of their suffering bore down on my chest, stifling my breath. I looked to my friends, desperation etched into their faces. "We have to help them," I said, feeling the urgency climb. They looked uncertain, but I could feel their resolve hardening. "It's what we came for," I said, my voice steadying. "We have to finish this." The shadows swirled tightly around us, hunger and desire clawing at the edges of my consciousness, demanding. I realized that if we were to confront the darkness, we needed to face it head-on, not as victims but as a force of light. Drawing everyone close, I gripped the diary tight, feeling the power thrumming within. "Together, we can break this curse," I proclaimed, a fierce brightness igniting in my chest, revealing hidden strength. I breathed deeply, letting the energy flow through me, illuminating the sorrow surrounding us. By love and friendship, we break the chains of despair. With that, I opened the diary again, forcing my voice to resonate through the darkened chamber. "We hear you. Your pain is not forgotten. We will help you." The shadows surged angrily, twisting and swirling around us as if they were alive, resisting the light that ignited within me. Yet I could feel my friends joining in, channeling their energy with mine. Their voices raised together began to drown out the whispers, a chorus of defiance against the encroaching despair. "Let them go! You are not alone!" we cried, all of us moving as one, a united front against the storm. Light erupted from our hands, bright and blinding, pushing against the shadows that coiled like serpents, clawing to reclaim their lost souls. The walls shook violently as the shadows shrieked, a cacophony of anguish and rage mixing with our cries. I felt the power swell, the very essence of the ship vibrating, the dark presence writhing under pressure. And then, in a moment of clarity, I felt something shift, a crack in the darkness. "We release you," I yelled, throwing my arms wide as the light surged out from us, enveloping everything in brilliance. It swelled to fill the entire room, illuminating every nook and cranny, banishing the shadows that had clung to this ghostly vessel. The wails of tortured souls filled the air, and I saw glimpses of them, shadowy forms breaking free, eyes suddenly clear and filled with hope. As the last remnants of darkness dissolved around us, I felt the weight lift, a wave of relief washing over me. The room lightened, and in that blinding glow, the spirits of the ship began to ascend, leaving behind echoes of gratitude. But the moment of peace was short-lived. Just as the last flickering shadows faded into nothingness, a low rumble reverberated beneath my feet, taut and ominous, like the heartbeat of something far greater. I exchanged worried glances with my friends, our faces a mix of confusion and unease. "What was that?" one of them asked, her voice a whisper tinged with fear. The room trembled again, more violently this time, shaking the remnants of debris loose from the ceiling, dust, raining down like the remnants of long-buried memories. I squinted into the corners, where darkness still lingered. "I don't know, but it feels like the ship is angry," I replied, a shiver skittering up my spine. The walls creaked, groaning as if awakening from a deep slumber. Every beam seemed to pulse with energy, an unsettling feeling gnawed at me. Something was not done here. The atmosphere thickened as I took a step back, my heart racing. The diary lay open on the floor, pages fluttering in a sudden breeze that felt too cold, too accusing. As if sensing my fear, the shadows reformed, swirling around the trunk we had just opened. The vessel thumped again, and I could feel a deep, resonating echo vibrating through my body. Did we stir something? I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. A figure began to emerge from the swirling darkness, growing larger and more defined by the second. It was a silhouette at first, its edges sharp and jagged. The shape was unmistakable, a tall, imposing figure with shadows spilling from its form like smoke across the ground, creating an almost liquid surface. I felt a pulse of fear clawing at me as the entity materialized, its eyes glowing a menacing red, the depths of its gaze swirling with darkness that seemed to consume the light around it. The air grew heavy, suffocating, and I could feel the weight of despair clinging to me again, a familiar grip that made it hard to breathe. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling as it seemed to echo off the walls. My friends stepped back, fear etched across their faces, but I felt rooted to the spot, drawn in by an unseen force. "Foolish mortals," the voice whispered, slithering like serpents through the air, wrapping around my thoughts. It was a cacophony of voices layered beneath one another, 1,000 regrets and sorrows distilled into a single breath. "You think you freed us? You've merely angered the guardian of this vessel." The shadows swirled violently, and I realized they were no longer just wisps waiting to escape. They were a thrumming mass, anything but benign, filled with a hunger that eclipsed everything. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I took a step back, heart thundering in my chest. Suddenly, a piercing wail erupted from the darkness, echoing through the small room like a banshee's cry. It rattled the walls, shattering the hope we had just felt moments ago. "You will pay for your trespass," it howled, the wind whipping around us fiercely. "This isn't good," I stammered, panic flaring as the shadows surged. They began to close in on me, tendrils reaching out like the fingers of ghosts longing for flesh. I turned to run, but they twisted around my legs, binding them together. My friends were grappling with their own shadows, trying to fend off the dark tendrils that sought to claim them, faces grimacing in horror. "Fight it!" I shouted, desperate to remind them of our earlier victory. We had come so far, and I couldn't let despair swallow us again. I concentrated, mentally pushing against the binding darkness, but it was like trying to stop a flood with my bare hands. The entity's laughter twisted through the air, cruel and mocking, drowning out our united shouts. Suddenly, I felt a cold rush press against my back. "Don't turn around," a voice urged, but against the mounting terror, I had to know. I whipped around, heart stopping as the silhouette stretched, becoming even larger, absorbing shadows like a monstrous deity. Its eyes blazed as it stared straight into my soul. "Let them go. You are no longer their master," I yelled into the void, trying to find strength within myself. The shadows hummed with anger, the energy vibrating like a living thing. With a surge of courage, I pushed my hands forward, a wave of blue light erupting from my palms. "For the sake of the lost," I cried, breathless as I directed the beam towards the towering figure. It collided with the entity, illuminating the room for a brief moment, revealing the anguished faces of the spirits trapped within the shadows, their mouths opening in silent, desperate cries for help. The moment barely lingered before the darkness retaliated, wrapping around me tighter, squeezing the air from my lungs. "Fool!" the entity hissed as the shadows constricted further, pulling me down toward the floor. I could feel memories streaming through me, their pain twisting and amalgamating with my own fear. Images flashed before my eyes, echoes of the ship's tortured past, terrifying screams layered atop one another, begging for release. It felt as though I was suffocating, drowning not only in darkness but in the stories of the past, filled with despair, betrayal, and loss. "Focus!" I yelled to my friends, desperately hoping they could push back against their own fears. I concentrated on the blue light in my hands, channeling every ounce of hope I had left into it. "Together, we can do this," I cried, my voice trembling. They began to chant alongside me, their voices rising defiantly as we formed a circle. As the light around us pulsed, it created an electrifying sphere, illuminating the oppressive shadows. The figure twisted and wailed, caught in our binding light. The cries grew louder, drowning us in a cacophony of anguish. But I refused to falter. The desperation surged through me as I clung to the hope that this would end. The shadows wove in and out, attempting to find weaknesses, and I felt my strength waning. "We have to push harder," I urged, holding onto the light as if it were a lifeline. Each flicker of the illumination felt like a heartbeat, pulsing with the essence of fleeing souls. With the energy building, I shouted, "This is not your domain anymore. We will break your chains." The dark figure screamed, a sound that pierced my very being, echoing off the walls as I sensed its resolve starting to weaken. I could see strands of light piercing through the fabric of darkness, pushing into the depths, illuminating the shackled shadows. "Keep going," I shouted, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. "All of us, remember why we are here." Those anguished faces materialized more vividly, appearing in the light cast by our efforts. Gratitude mixed with sorrow washed over me like a wave, and I realized these were the souls of those who had been trapped by the entity. They needed to break free just as desperately as we did. The shadows screamed in fury as my heart surged, and I pushed deeper, feeling the spirits rise alongside me, entrusting their pain to our light. "Together," I yelled, ready to face whatever dread awaited us. The final surge of energy released, shattering across the room in a blinding explosion of blue light. I felt the heat as it rushed past me, the shadows howling as they were engulfed. The force of it knocked me back, and for a split second, everything was sheer, brilliant light. I closed my eyes against the onslaught, hardly daring to breathe, waiting for the aftermath. In that moment, I felt a sense of calm settle within me, as if the fears and chaos that had spun around us were finally transforming. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone, and the shadows had dissipated into wisps of darkness that evaporated into the ether. The air felt lighter, drenched in what seemed like an ethereal glow. I looked around at my friends, their expressions mirroring my disbelief. "Yes, we did it," I breathed, but deep within me, an unsettling nagging sense remained. The battle may have been won, but the ship was still trembling, a palpable tension racing beneath the deck. The victory felt oddly hollow, but there was no time to dwell. "We need to get out of here," I urged. "Now!" The ship's haunting melody echoed morosely as we gathered ourselves, hearts still racing, fear etching deeper lines of uncertainty on our faces. We hurried towards the stairs, determined to escape the remnants of what had just transpired. As we ascended, though, a deep rumble echoed once more, this time from above us. The ship quaked ominously. "Is it going to sink?" One of my friends panicked, glancing nervously at the ceiling. "We need to move faster." With dread pooling in the pit of my stomach, I quickened my pace, adrenaline coursing through me. As we reached the deck, I was flooded with relief. But that relief was short-lived. Standing there, the night felt suffocating, air thick and smoky, blocking out the moonlight. It wasn't just the fear of the shadows returning. It was the overwhelming presence of something else. The ocean roiled beneath us, dark waves crashing against the ship's hull with terrifying force. I could hear whispers rising amid the tumult, unrecognizable voices blending into a haunting chorus as though they conveyed a warning. Run, leave, escape. Yet another chill seized me as I searched the horizon. Where will we go? I murmured, feeling lost. The ship felt like a restless beast, shadows moving along the edges, waiting for another chance to strike. And then I spotted it, a figure standing at the bulwark, half hidden in the gloom. "Is someone there?" My voice cracked, a thrill of fear racing up my spine. The silhouette turned slowly, revealing a face that seemed familiar, yet blurred by the night. My breath caught in my throat. It looked like one of the crew I thought we had saved, a face lost in time, a victim of the ship's curse. "Help us," it murmured, eyes glistening but filled with a darkness that echoed the depths of the sea. It reached out a hand, clawed fingers stretching toward me like a marionette yearning for a puppeteer. "Don't go near it," I shouted to my friends, panic flooding my voice. But they stood frozen, unable to tear their gazes from the wretched figure. As I stepped back, the air crackled around us, and tendrils of darkness snaked back out, creeping along the deck between us. "We should leave now," I urged again, the urgency penetrating through the fog of fear. The mist thickened as the rest of the apparitions began to emerge from the shadows, their mournful eyes reflecting centuries of suffering. And suddenly, multifaceted whispers began filling the air, a synchronized chant of despair wrapping around us, pushing us closer to the edge of the ship. "Help us! Set us free!" The resonance pulsed through the air, beckoning, creating a magnetic pull that tried to sway our feet toward the darkness. We huddled together, but I felt one of my friends take a hesitant step forward. It's calling to me," she murmured, captivated by the crises of the past manifesting before us. "I have to go." "No!" I shouted, lunging toward her, but the shadows pushed me back, a solid wall of darkness snapping at my heels. "They want to take you," I screamed in anguish. She hesitated, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. The shadows began swirling anew, intensified by her wavering determination. "Don't trust it," came another friend's voice, urging her to pull away. But the figure was relentless, its dark hands extended, the ambience thickening with confusion and allure. The wind howled around us, and the ship groaned, as if caught in the middle of a struggle between its lost souls and our desperate fight for freedom. "I can help," my friend pleaded, trying to reach out to the figure. "We can save you." "No, don't listen," I screamed, fighting against the dark that gripped my heart. "They will trap you once more." And then it happened. The figure's face flickered brighter for an instant, revealing lines of fear, desperation, and anguish. No longer just a lost soul, but one caught in the cycle, a puppet to the dark entity we had already encountered. "Please," I cried out, trying to convey any semblance of hope. "Let her go." The sea roared beneath us, waves crashing against the hull. The night darkened as though the sun itself had forgotten how. The night darkened as though the sun itself had forgotten how to shine. The negativity wrapped around us, thick and suffocating, while my heart raced in my chest. Waves crashed against the ship's hull like angry spirits demanding to be heard, and the haunting whisper of the entity wrapped around me, chilling every fiber of my being. "Don't!" I yelled, my voice cracking under the weight of the terror surrounding us. My friend hesitated again, her face flickering between fear and resolve. The dark figure twisted its mouth in a grin that didn't belong to this world, coaxing her with promises of peace and release. "You can't trust it," I cried, desperate to break the spell it cast upon her. But the shadows were relentless, coiling tighter, and I realized with growing dread that one wrong move could pull her into the depths of despair. With every second that passed, it became harder to breathe, the darkness wrapping around my chest like a noose. A primal instinct kicked in, urging me to act before it was too late. I lunged forward, a surge of adrenaline pushing me past the creeping shadows, but they lashed out, pulling me back. I felt the icy tendrils trying to drag me down, clawing against my skin, whispering sweet nothings that promised safety. Their deceptive allure wrapped around my mind, creating a daze that threatened to drown my thoughts. "Stop fighting," the figure hissed, its voice smooth like silk, but filled with deadly intent. My friend took another step toward it, her eyes glazing over. "Join us, join the lost. Find your peace." I felt my heart sink as I watched her, my words failing to reach her through the chaos, those dark promises entrenching deeper. "Please," I shouted, panic spilling from my voice. "Remember us? Remember who we are." My pulse raced as I reached out, my hand desperately grasping for any connection I could maintain. The darkness hissed like an angry snake, curling around me, but I fought against it with whatever willpower I had. A chilling silence enveloped us for a moment, and I could feel the ground shift, the ship groaning as if it acknowledged the battle playing out. Suddenly, the winds howled louder, and the figure reared back, drawing in the darkness surrounding it. I sensed it feeding off our fears, growing stronger with each passing moment. Then, a piercing scream shattered the air, an anguished cry that echoed through the ship, shaking the very foundations beneath my feet. It resonated within me, creating a whirlwind of emotions that tangled my thoughts. "We have to leave," I urged again, sensing the shift in the atmosphere as more figures emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted in agony. "They are here," the voices whispered, a mournful symphony that chilled my bones. "You cannot escape." My stomach twisted at their despairing tones, and I felt their feelings crawl under my skin, pulling me deeper into their torment. I turned back to my friend, her face pale, still mesmerized by the sinister figure. I couldn't let her slip away. "We're connected. The ship, it's a graveyard of sorrow," I called out, shoving against the shadows that now pressed tightly against my skin. "We have to break free. All of us." I closed my eyes, heart racing, feeling the turmoil around me. I thought of our journey, the battles we had fought together, and the joy of moments shared. When I opened my eyes again, I found my strength renewed, as though the memories lit a flame within me. "We can't let it take you," I shouted, my voice rising above the cries of the shadows. I reached toward her, the golden glow impossibly lighting my hands against the growing darkness. "Please, come back to us." For a second, our eyes locked in a moment of clarity, and I saw her wall of fear flicker. With a surge of determination, I bolted toward her, instinctively pulling the light within me, channeling all the love and memories into a single beam that shot through the suffocating weight around us. The instant the light struck, the shadows recoiled as though seared, shrieking in a billion voices rising to a fever pitch. The figure writhed, screeching against the brilliance, its cruel smile faltering as my friend blinked back to the surface. "Run!" I screamed, pulling her toward me. The shadows crackled and hissed, desperately trying to latch on her mind, but my light surrounded her in an iridescent bubble, pushing the darkness back. Together we stumbled backward, fighting against the maelstrom of confusion and agony. The ship rocked beneath us, the forces of darkness grasping for their prey. The night roared, a black tide threatening to pull us back into its depths. I could feel her beginning to come to herself, the recognition slowly returning to her wide eyes. I remember," she gasped, trembling as she reached for me, buoyed by our shared determination. "Don't let go." In that moment, I felt a bright jolt surging through my veins as hope ignited within us, binding us closer together. We can break free," I shouted, calling out the rest of our friends, hoping the strength of our bonds would be enough against the tide of despair. The figure contorted again, twisting violently as we barreled forward. "You can't escape me," it shrieked, its voice warping and rising as it plunged into darkness, vowing retribution. Then, with a sudden surge, the shadows lunged again, encompassing us in a furious wave, pulling us closer to the ship's edge. Together, we fought against the darkness that sought to devour us, pushing against the shadows in a desperate rush for the light. My heart pounded in my chest, and the weight of dread weighed heavy on my shoulders. I looked back at my friends, their faces filled with resolve and fear as they struggled against the relentless tide. "Keep moving," I yelled, adrenaline surging as I led the way, my feet pounding against the wooden deck of the ship. With every step, the light pulsed around us, pushing back at the shadows that clawed at our heels. But the darkness was relentless, its tendrils lashing out, scraping across my arms, leaving behind cold trails of where they touched. I could hear the lamenting cries of lost souls echoing all around, their desperate pleas mixing with our own. "Don't look back," one friend shouted, trying to keep our focus forward, but it was impossible. The shadows twisted and morphed, ever-changing, revealing horrors that tested the very fabric of my sanity. Faces peeked through the inky void, mouths forming silent screams, eyes wide with despair, reflecting the weight of centuries of loss. "They are lost," I murmured, guilt clawing at my heart. I was torn between the urge to help them and the need to save ourselves. But then I realized, if there was any chance to save the others, we had to escape first to gather the strength to fight back. As we reached the ship's edge, the breeze picked up, whipping through our hair and filling our lungs with the salt of the sea. Glancing around, I felt the ground begin to shift beneath me, the ship thrumming with ominous energy. "Jump!" I shouted, my voice fierce despite the terror churning in my stomach. One by one, we leaped, the waters below dark and murky, holding unknowable secrets, but we had no choice. We hit the surface with a splash, plunging into the cold depths. My heart raced as I sank momentarily, the darkness wrapping around me like a shroud, threatening to pull me down, deeper into the unknowable abyss. But just as quickly, I pushed myself back up, breaking through the waves, gasping for breath. My friends surfaced beside me, their faces pale but determined. "Now what?" one whispered, terror evident in her eyes as we treaded water, glancing back at the ship looming above, shadows still reaching for us. The weight of the spectral presence still lingered in the air, the ship spinning into chaos, and I knew that whatever had haunted us would not let us go so easily. "We swim farther away," I urged, adrenaline fueling my movements. The cold water cut through my skin and sent shivers rippling through my body, but there was no time for hesitation as we fought against the tide. With every stroke, the shadows beckoned, pulling at us with whispered promises of peace, but I could feel the light still flickering inside me. I fought against their call, redirecting my focus on the shore that seemed impossibly out of reach. All I could think of was the safety, the promise of escape from the haunted vessel. As we paddled toward the distant shoreline, the ship behind us rocked violently from side to side, the cries rising into a clamor of rage and despair. I stole a glance back and felt a chill grip my heart as I saw the figure at the ship's edge, observing us, its hollow eyes glinting with malevolence. It pointed a bony finger, sending a surge of dread rippling through me. "Faster!" I shouted, fear spurring me on, but the relentless shadows surged in pursuit, lashing out like dire wolves on a hunt. I could sense them splashing behind us like dark water, hungry for revenge. Breathing harder, I focused on the shore, battling the overwhelming urge to look back. As we neared the coastline, I sensed the energy shifting, the ship erupting in chaos behind us. The water surged and crashed as if the ocean itself was enraged. "It's breaking apart," one friend yelled, terror spiking in her voice. "Swim," I commanded, seeing the shoreline getting closer, feeling the pull of solid ground urging me forward. But just as the jagged rocks began to rise above the waves, an enormous black wave surged from the ship, crashing over the water's surface with an otherworldly force. My stomach dropped as realization crashed over me. The darkness was rising, ready to unleash its wrath in a final desperate attempt to hold us captive. "Go!" I screamed, adrenaline pooling in my veins as we pushed ourselves harder. The wave advanced, swirling with its cursed energy, and I could feel the malevolence rolling off it, tasting the despair that sought to consume us. But it wasn't just about escape anymore. The tide was shifting, and if we didn't reach the shoreline, we risked taking in something far worse than the darkness that lurked behind us. The energy soared as the water churned and crashed, becoming a maelstrom of chaotic force that threatened to drag us under. With one final burst of strength, we lunged toward the land, arms flailing as we desperately clawed our way through the churning waters. I reached the shore first, gasping at the harsh rocks as I scrambled to pull myself up, feeling the rain pounding my back with each crashing wave. My friends followed close behind, dragging themselves onto the jagged edge of safety just moments before the waves surged forward, crashing down where we had just been. I could feel the ground shake beneath us, and though we had managed to escape, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was far from over. We lay panting for a moment, gripping the wet stones and catching our breath, but the gnawing dread remained, clawing at my insides. The air felt charged, electric with lingering darkness, and whispers danced through my mind, a reminder of what we had faced. The shadows loomed ominously behind us, still actively clawing at the edge where we had just escaped. "We have to keep moving," I urged, looking at the others whose eyes still glimmered with fear. "We can't linger here." With heavy hearts, we rose unsteadily to our feet, the night still thick with impending danger. The weight of the ship's cursed legacy cast a shadow upon us. It was clear we could not rest. What happened next would shape our fates forever. As we stumbled away from the water's edge, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was still lingering not far behind us. Each step felt heavier, as if the spirits we thought we'd freed were still reaching for us, begging for a release we couldn't entirely understand. There was a heaviness in the air, a silence punctuated only by the sound of rustling leaves and our own footsteps. "What now?" someone finally whispered, their voice trembling slightly. I looked around, the trees looming overhead, shadows creeping in as the moonlight struggled to break through. "Start a fire," I instructed, my mind racing. "We need light." We quickly gathered dry branches and leaves, trying to shake off the remnants of the nightmarish experience behind us. The flames flickered to life, the golden glow serving as a fragile barrier against the consuming darkness. But the relief of light brought only fleeting solace. Shadows danced mockingly along the edges of the fire, undulating like phantoms eager to step beyond their confines. I fought to keep the fear from overtaking me, knowing that this couldn't be the end. "Do you think they will follow us?" someone asked, their voice barely above a whisper, filled with trepidation. I glanced around, the trees surrounding us like towering sentinels, shadows pooling at their bases. The air felt alive with unease, a heavy weight pressing down, making it hard to think clearly. The fire crackled as we huddled closer, its flickering light casting eerie shapes that danced along the ground. The warmth was comforting, but I felt a shiver race down my spine, knowing the darkness had chased us to this very spot. "I'm not sure," I replied cautiously, my eyes scanning the surrounding woods. "But I don't think it's over yet." I could still hear the distant echoes of shipwrecked souls, their whispers wrapping around my thoughts like a shroud. What happened back there? Why did those figures seem so familiar? I wondered aloud, feeling as if a dark veil had settled over my mind, refusing to let go of the horrors we had witnessed. Then I noticed something strange. The shadows around the fire seemed to flicker in a way that felt off, almost like they were stirring restlessly. I leaned closer, peering into the areas where the flames couldn't quite reach. "Anyone else see that?" I asked, feeling a prickling sensation crawl across my skin. Suddenly, a rustle came from the bushes nearby, sharp and unexpected. My heart leaped into my throat as I turned. "What was that?" I asked, the fear rising again. It felt like the forest itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen. A high-pitched laugh echoed through the trees, sending chills racing down my spine. It was twisted and cruel, unlike anything I had ever heard. "That can't be good," I muttered, eyes wide, staring into the inky blackness that surrounded our small circle of light. "Stay close," I commanded, anger and fear mixing in my chest. My friends shuffled closer, fidgeting nervously, their eyes darting around as if expecting something to jump out from the shadows. I could feel my breath quicken, not knowing how much longer this fragile peace would last. Without warning, a dark shape shot out of the bushes, skirting around the fire before disappearing into the opposite darkness, leaving only the echo of that disturbing laugh behind. "What was that?" I gasped, heart pounding from the surprise. "I don't know, but it's not friendly," another friend said, their voice trembling slightly as they reached for the nearby branches, clutching them like weapons. The forest seemed to close in around us, thickening with every passing moment, wrapping us in its ominous embrace. The laugh echoed again, closer this time, followed by a series of guttural growls that sent chills through my whole being. I could see the fear reflected in my friends' eyes as they turned to me for reassurance. "We have to stay strong," I urged, though my own voice wavered. "Whatever it is, we can fight it together." But deep down, I felt the creeping doubt invading my thoughts. What if it was something we couldn't fight? What if we were already too far gone, tethered to the ship's curse that wouldn't let us escape its clutches? Just then, the fire flickered violently, the flames extending as if trying to wave us away, and I could feel a growing storm swirling in the air like a beast poised to strike. I glanced at my friends, all of us caught in this unsettling moment of pure anticipation. Before I could say anything, the bushes began to shake violently, and a figure emerged, silhouetted against the backdrop of the darkened woods. My heart pounded in my chest as I braced myself, ready for whatever we were about to face. A girl stood before us, wild-eyed with tangled hair framing her dirty face. She was trembling, sweat glistening on her brow as if she had come from running for her life. You have to help us," she gasped, desperation gripping her voice. "It's coming for you." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping forward cautiously. "Who is coming?" Her expression shifted, fear morphing into something darker. "The shadows," she whispered, glancing back over her shoulder. "It knows you escaped. It wants to claim you as its own." My heart raced as I exchanged dubious glances with my friends. There was something off about her, something both haunting and fascinating, as if she had been touched by that very darkness we had just fled. "How do you know that? What shadows?" I pressed, feeling an urgent need for answers. "They took my friends," she choked out, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And they won't rest until they have more. They'll whisper to you, fill your dreams with despair, make you think there's no way out." "It's true," I heard another friend murmur, nodding. "Those voices, I can still hear them." The heaviness spread like a dark cloud, engulfing us once more as we remembered the chilling whispers that had clawed at our minds since the evening began. The girl continued, "I thought I could help my friends, but it already had them. I couldn't stop it. None of us can." Her eyes darted nervously around us, as if she expected shadows to leap forth at any moment. "We have to leave," I said firmly, trying to rally my friends together. "We can't stay here. If the shadows know we're here, we're in danger." The girl's eyes widened in horror. "But you don't understand. It won't let you go. It's craving more souls. For every soul claimed, another is always begging to be saved." I thought, the irony of that bitter realization washing over me. I could feel the weight of her words twisting my insides. And in that moment, the forest seemed to groan in agreement. As if summoned by the very fear gripping our hearts, the shadows began to coalesce into shapes around us, dark tendrils reaching out from the trees, curling ominously as they slinked closer. The area around our fire flickered violently, and I could see grotesque faces, twisted and anguished, peeking through the darkness, their mouths contorted with silent screams. "We can't stay!" I screamed, panic flooding my senses as I pushed my friends into motion. We tore away from the fire, breaking toward the edge of the woods, desperate for whatever lay beyond the shadows' grasp. But the shadows surged, a tide of malevolence crashing down upon us. I could hear the sickly sweet whispers urging me to stop, promising to extinguish the fear consuming me. "Come back! You belong to us," they chimed in eerie harmony, drawing dangerously close. I grasped my friend's hand tightly as we barreled forward, my breath quickening with each frantic step. I fought through the groggy mist coating my mind, pushing past the creeping sensation of hopelessness that gripped my heart. "Don't listen," I shouted, urging them forward as we broke through the dense thicket, our feet slamming against the earth. The shadows clawed at my thoughts, whispering dreadful secrets that danced between light and dark, threatening to pull me under once more. With adrenaline pumping in my veins, we charged down a narrow path, and I could hear the rustling behind us, a relentless pursuit that refused to give in. A moment of clarity flickered in my mind. What if we could outrun them? The chaos behind me intensified, the growls turning into shrieks that reverberated through the very ground we stood upon. I felt the shadows inching closer, their icy breath fanning against my back as terror wrapped around my body like chains. A little further, I urged as we stumbled down a small incline, the world around us blurring. The shadows followed like hungry wolves, snapping at our heels, urging us to give in to despair. Just when it felt like the darkness might engulf us, we burst into a small clearing lit by the pale glow of the moon. The sudden light was both eerie and beautiful, illuminating the edges of the woods while casting the shadows back, albeit temporarily. Panting, we paused for a brief moment to gather our wits, the adrenaline still coursing fiercely through our veins. "We have to keep moving," I insisted, my mind racing with thoughts of our dwindling chances. "We can't let them take us again." But as I turned to urge my friends on, I saw her, the girl who had warned us, standing at the edge of the clearing, her hollow eyes wide and filled with terror. She pointed into the darkness behind us, and I felt a wave of cold wash over me. "They're coming," she uttered, barely above a whisper. "They won't stop until you are one of them." My blood ran cold as I turned to look, dread pooling in my stomach. The shadows were swirling closer, gathering like a festival of horrors birthed from our worst nightmares. Each twisted face in the dark glared in our direction, and I could see the depths of their longing, hungry to reclaim what they had lost. "Run!" I screamed as the shadows rushed forth, their forms twisting into grotesque apparitions, reaching hands that scraped against the dirt, drawing closer with every fleeting moment. There was no turning back. We dashed deeper into the clearing, the woods fading behind us as we raced toward a narrow path leading into the unknown. My heart hammered as I sensed the shadows breaking through, hot on our trail, driven by dark desire, clinging desperately to the hope of dragging us back into their cold embrace. Each step felt like a battle, as if the weight of their despair wrapped around my legs like chains, desperate to pull me back down. Determination surged through me, and I pushed past the creeping dread, urging my friends onward into the treacherous unknown. What awaited us beyond that clearing felt like the edge of another nightmare, but standing still would mean surrender. I could feel their darkness nipping at my heels, the haunted cries of lost souls threading through the air, creating an orchestra of despair that filled my head. It was now or never, life or something far worse. As a guttural growl reverberated through the air, echoing from the heart of the darkness, I felt hope slip from my grasp. But I couldn't falter now, not when my friends were counting on me. As I pushed onward down the narrow path, the weight of dread in my chest grew heavier. Every step felt like it echoed in the silence, each footfall replaced by the rustle of shadows at my back. I could almost feel their eyes boring into me, hungry for fear, for despair, and I tightened my grip on my friend's hand. "What if we don't make it?" one of them whispered, breathless, the strain of panic evident in their voice. My stomach twisted at the thought, but I couldn't afford to dwell on that. "We can't think like that," I urged, my voice stronger than my heart felt. "Focus on getting away. Just keep running." But a piercing scream pierced the stillness, cutting through the dark like shards of glass. It wasn't a scream of fear or pain. It was a scream of fury. My heart stopped, and I skidded to a halt, looking back. Shadows flickered at the edge of the clearing, shifting and twisting in ways that didn't belong to nature. Suddenly, one of my friends fell to the ground, clutching their head, gasping as if struggling against an unseen weight. "Stop! Make it stop!" they cried, eyes wild with terror. I knelt beside them, placing a firm hand on their shoulder, shaking them gently. "We have to go. Focus on my voice. We can't give in." But the shadows were relentless, swirling around us, stretching out with claw-like ends, trying to snatch us back. An eerie laugh erupted from the darkness, echoing like the wails of tortured souls. I felt the temperature drop, a bone-chilling cold wrapping around us, wrapping me in its icy embrace. "Get up!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. "We have to move!" Finally, they found their footing, scrambling to get up, but I sensed the shadows closing in, the atmosphere thick with dread. Without looking back, I began to run again, dragging them behind me, propelled by an instinctive urge to escape whatever nightmare had taken root in the woods. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches clawing at the night sky, like skeletal fingers reaching out as if to keep us from slipping away. I could hear faint whispers behind me, malevolent murmurs that called my name, sweet and sickly. Join us? You belong to us? Adrenaline surged as I fought against the chilling invitation, desperately willing myself to break free of their malignant grasp. A sharp branch whipped across my face, its jagged edge slicing my skin, but I didn't care. Pain was trivial compared to the encroaching darkness. The path began to slope downward, and despair gripped me as I stumbled into a small hollow, filled with twilight shadows. Before us, a decrepit cabin stood, its wooden walls rotting, door hanging ajar as if beckoning us inside. I hesitated, knowing I was torn between safety and potential disaster. Should we go in? One friend asked, their voice shaking. I chewed my lip. We don't have time to make a better decision. We need somewhere to hide. Nodding, we rushed into the cabin, hearts pounding as we crossed the threshold. The air inside was musty, filled with the scent of mildew and decay. As I frantically searched the room, I noticed strange symbols carved into the walls, mangled shapes that glowed faintly even in the dim light. They look like warnings, I whispered. The shadows outside moved swiftly past the windows, just beyond our sight. Look, another friend cried, pointing to the fireplace. It was cold and abandoned, but on the mantel, remnants of a long-dead fire smoldered as if something had recently been there. I stepped closer, feeling an unsettling chill creep through me, as if time had warped inside this place. We need to barricade the door, I said, glancing nervously at the entrance. Just as we started to pile chairs and fallen debris against it, the whispers outside grew louder, almost mocking us. The darkness surged, clawing at the door with desperate intent, seeking to pull us back into its terrifying embrace. Suddenly, the door creaked open slightly, revealing just a crack of the shadows outside. Unable to hold back my instinct, I rushed toward it, pulling it shut, focusing on keeping it closed. "Help me!" I shouted to my friends, panic invading my voice. They scrambled to my side, pushing against the door as shadows seeped in, wrapping around our feet and pulling at our ankles, creating a sickening sense of dread. My heart raced as I felt the tendrils tugging, whispering promises of eternal peace. "Let go!" I gasped, shaking my head violently, trying to clear the haze of despair that threatened to overwhelm my senses. With all my strength, I pressed my back against the door and pushed harder, feeling my friends do the same. The shadows screeched in frustration, a cacophony of chaotic sounds filling the air as they fought against our resistance. "They're getting in," one friend yelled, fear lacing their voice. I closed my eyes, focusing on keeping the door shut. "We have to think of something. We can't let them take us." In that moment, the cabin trembled, shaking violently as if protesting our presence. The wall markings glowed brighter, and suddenly, I felt a pulse in the very foundation of the cabin, a heartbeat resonating underneath, echoing with ancient power. "Guys!" I blurted out, suddenly piecing things together. What if these symbols are not just warnings? What if they're a binding spell? "Binding," one of my friends echoed, glancing nervously at the door, fear written across their face. "Yeah, maybe they can help us. If we can figure out how to activate them, maybe we can fight back." As the shadows grew stronger, swirling and churning incessantly, I stepped back, eyeing the symbols. My heart raced. "We have to try." We moved closer, running our hands along the markings, searching for something that would set off their hidden power. I whispered the words that rolled off my tongue, voice growing stronger with each syllable. The light illuminated our surroundings, casting back the dark forms that pressed against the door. And then it happened. Our voices melded together, chanting as if summoned by the darkness itself. Each word invoked a connection to the cabin, the shadows outside screeching as if they too felt the pull of ancient forces. The air grew thick with energy, swirling around us, raising the hair on my arms. The symbols glimmered with light, and a warm wave surged through my body, igniting a fierce resolve deep within me. "Keep chanting. Don't stop," I urged, my heart swelling with hope, even as the shadows clawed at the threshold. They hissed and growled, desperate to silence us, but we continued, pouring our voices into the spell. As the final words escaped my lips, a blinding light erupted from the markings, and the shadows shrieked, retreating into the night. It was as if the very essence of the dark was being ripped away, freeing us from its suffocating grasp. But even with the light chasing the shadows away, I could feel the remnants still lurking just beyond reach. My breath came in quick gasps, and my heart pounded fiercely against my ribcage. We weren't out of danger yet. "Look," one friend pointed, and I turned to see gaps forming in the shadows, as if a path had opened up. "The way is clear. Go now," I shouted, renewed determination surging through me. "We've come this far. Let's escape." We took off, bursting out of the cabin, the cool night air hitting us like a breath of freedom. The moon hung high above, illuminating the path ahead as we sprinted, the echoes of our fate still clawing at our heels. As we raced into the woods, it felt as if the very fabric of reality was pulling tight around us. The whispers faded, but I knew they would return. Shadows would always hide, always lurk, waiting for our weakness. I glanced back one last time, the cabin growing smaller in the distance. A part of me wondered if it had been an illusion, a dream crafted by the darkness that pursued us. But before I could dwell too long, the wind gusted, a sharp howl cutting through the stillness, and I felt dread once more settle into the pit of my stomach. No matter how far we ran, darkness was relentless. As it coiled around us, trailing like smoke behind, it carved into my mind a chilling thought. This was only the beginning. As I pushed deeper into the woods, breathless from fear and adrenaline, I could still sense their presence, like an unseen predator stalking its prey. My heart raced, every sound magnified in the oppressive silence that surrounded us. The spirited laughter of my friends felt stolen by the dark, drowned by the whispers of torment that hung in the air, waiting to snatch us back into their cold embrace. "We need to find a way out of here. Fast," I urged, feeling the weight of their anxiety pressing against me. Shadows danced between the trees, flickering just out of sight, teasing my senses, making me question every movement. Each crack of a branch or rustle of leaves seemed to come from the dark, sending jolts of panic down my spine. "Do you think it's over?" one friend asked, glancing nervously behind us, eyes wide with uncertainty. I shook my head. "No, I can't shake the feeling they're still watching us." The uneasy sensation settled like a dense fog, wrapping around us, clawing at my thoughts, fueling the terror that had scored so deeply into my mind. We moved quickly, finding a small clearing that opened up ahead. The moon cast eerie beams through the trees, illuminating the underbrush, as I took a moment to catch my breath. There was a strange stillness, a calm that felt entirely unnatural, as if nature itself held its breath. "Let's stay alert," I whispered, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Just then, I spotted something, an old, moss-covered stone well at the edge of the clearing. It seemed out of place, an anomaly in this tangled wilderness. The stones were slick with dampness, and a heavy mist emanated from the opening, shrouding the interior in darkness. "What is that?" I asked, my curiosity piqued even as a visceral instinct warned me away. One friend stepped closer to peer inside, but I grabbed their arm. "Wait, we should be careful." The well seemed to beckon with an otherworldly allure, its mouth opening wide like a gaping wound in the earth. "It could be just a well, a way we can get some water," they reasoned. But even as they spoke, I sensed something dark lurking beneath the surface. "Promise me we won't get too close." Again, I heard that laugh, the same sinister chuckle that had echoed through the woods before. It enveloped me, wrapping around my thoughts and drowning my resolve in a wave of dread. "We have to go," I insisted, pulling my friend back. But it was too late. The well echoed with whispers now, floating upwards like smoke, twisting and intertwining like serpents wrapping around our minds. "Help us. You can save us." It was an agonizing melody, full of sorrow and desperation, that wound itself around my heart. "What is it saying?" another friend asked, their voice strained as they stepped cautiously toward the edge, curiosity battling fear. "No!" I shouted, but it was too late. My warnings lost in the pull of the well's enticing darkness. They bent closer, and I felt an overwhelming urge to pull them back. "Get away from there!" Suddenly, something erupted from within the well, a rush of cold air that extinguished the light around us, plunging us into twilight. We all stumbled back, hearts racing. A figure clawed its way from the depths, a wretched silhouette emerging, draped in shadows with hollow eyes that seemed to pull at the very essence of our souls. It let out a blood-curdling scream, a sound so visceral it shook the ground beneath our feet. "Join us! Join us!" The voice echoed, a chorus of the damned beckoning with sorrowful hunger. "Run!" I screamed, terror flooding my veins. We took off, propelled by primal instinct, bursting into the thicket surrounding the well. The darkness followed, swirling around us like a hungry cyclone, reaching out for our very shadows. We raced deeper into the woods, instinctively moving toward a faint glow that flickered in the distance, hoping against hope it was a sanctuary. The laughter chased us, the whispers clawing at our minds, threatening to consume us whole. I could feel panic rising, each breath becoming heavier as dread flooded my senses. Trees loomed like ancient sentinels, but even their branches seemed to twist unnaturally, seeming to reach for us. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable, like the very ground might betray us any moment. Just as we neared the source of the light, it abruptly vanished, a cruel, pranking flicker, swallowed by the abyss of night. My heart dropped, and I turned back, sensing the shadows now stalking us, more tangible, more malevolent. They had morphed into grotesque shapes, limbs elongating unnaturally as if they danced to a macabre tune only they could hear. "Come on, this way!" I shouted, pulling my friends towards a large tree with thick roots protruding from the earth. I shoved them beneath its gnarled base, hoping it would provide some shelter from the dark. As we huddled beneath the massive roots, silence enveloped us, weighing down on me like a suffocating blanket. I strained to hear over my racing heart, breathing heavily, acutely aware that we were no longer in the realm of the living. The shadows hung heavy, hiding just beyond our sight, waiting, biding their time. It became harder to distinguish between reality and those whispers that clawed at my brain. They echoed my thoughts, brought my fears to life, taunted me with images of my friends being snatched away. As I looked around, the glaring truth settled in. We were trapped in a game made for their amusement, a terrifying tableau of fear and hopelessness, each of us just another pawn. But then, amidst the thick cloud of darkness, I noticed something flickering in the corner of my eye. It was a faint shimmer, glowing against the backdrop of the shadows. My mind raced as I took a cautious step toward it, trying to ignore the frantic whispers that begged me to stop. "No, no," I muttered under my breath, aware that every instinct screamed to stay hidden. Yet the glow intrigued me, pulling me like a moth to the flame. I had to know. "Guys, stay here," I warned, feeling the weight of their uncertain stares. "Where are you going?" one friend hissed, anxiety thick in their voice. We shouldn't split up, but it was too late. My feet carried me forward against my better judgment, slipping into the shadows where the light beckoned. I found myself wandering into a small glade, the radiance revealing a small altar draped in vines, old and mysterious. The glow emanated from an intricate crystal set delicately at the center, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. I could barely breathe as I approached, entranced by its beauty, a stark contrast to the chaos that loomed beyond the edges of the glade. As I reached out, a profound energy washed over me. I felt connected to something ancient. Yet, just as quickly as it came, a warning surged through my veins. This light did not belong to me. It belonged to the shadows that waited just outside, the very darkness I ran from, and they would come to claim it. In an instant, a figure slipped into the clearing behind me, a wretched specter, its body writhing like smoke coalescing into a half-formed shape. Hollow eyes locked onto mine, and for a brief second, I could see flashes of agony fill its gaze, the awareness of lost lives, lost hope. The shadows whispered, "Join us, be one with the night." Panic swept through my body as the figure lunged, and I stumbled backward, disoriented. I had awakened something I wasn't ready for. The atmosphere trembled with rage, swirling shadows reverberating as if in response to my curiosity. My breath quickened as I backpedaled frantically, my instincts screaming to escape. I could feel the space around me closing in, becoming oppressive as the light flickered and waned, swallowed by thick darkness surging toward me. Just as I turned to flee, the ground beneath me shifted, and I tripped, falling into the beckoning depths of the shadows. The whispers consumed me, crawling under my skin, entwining with my thoughts. "You can't escape." I fought against the instinctual pull of despair, clawing my way back, heart thudding like a drum in my chest. My mind raced with thoughts of my friends, torn between fleeing the specter or returning to what felt like safety under the ancient tree. But in that moment, grasping the essence of the shadows, I realized something terrifying. The whispers were right. There was no escaping this. I was part of it now, woven into the very fabric of their eternal night. But giving in felt wrong. There had to be a way out, a way back to the light. "No!" I gasped out loud, voice trembling as I fought back against the suffocating force trying to pull me down. I surged upward, breaking free from the depths of confusion, desperate to find my footing. My surroundings spun like a dark vortex, threatening to drag me into oblivion. And just as I was about to give in, I cried out for my friends. "Help me!" And then, out of the swirling darkness, emerged the faces of my friends, horror mirrored in their eyes. They reached for me as I grasped wildly, intertwining our hands, pulling me from the abyss. Together, we formed a circle, standing strong against the darkness. The crystal pulsed anew, and the ancient markings on the tree glowed bright like guiding stars. My heart raced as I recognized it was now or never, a final, desperate attempt to reclaim our lives before falling into the clutches of shadows forever. With a unified shout, we embraced the light, channeling our fear into energy, a force erupting from deep within us. Shadows recoiled as they screamed, weaving through the ground, scrambling to escape the raw power we invoked as one. But we had to hold on. Only together could we wield whatever ancient magic this place granted. As the shadows writhed and shrieked around us, I looked to my friends, hearts beating as one. We stepped forward, pushing through the darkness until we broke free of its grasp. As we emerged into the light, the shadows howled in fury, their hold on us finally diminishing. Yet, as we stood there, panting and trembling, the truth settled heavily in my mind like lead. This was merely a small victory. The shadows knew where we were, knew our fears, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they would return, stronger and hungrier than before. We had escaped the depths of darkness for now. We stood in the stark light, gasping for breath as the shadows writhed and recoiled, but I sensed the reality. Our escape had only shifted the battle. The woods were alive, and the darkness was watching, coiling around every tree, every branch, searching for our weaknesses. I looked at my friends, their eyes, wide with fear and disbelief. "We can't linger here. We have to keep moving." The urgency in my voice propelled them forward, our instincts driving us deeper into the unknown. As we moved, the air grew colder, thick with an unsettling stillness that felt more like a predator stalking its prey than a peaceful forest. The moon hovered high above us, casting ghostly shadows that flickered at the corner of my vision. Each step I took felt heavy, like the ground itself was pulling against me, reluctant to let go. I could hear the faint murmurs of the forest, teasing whispers that seemed to echo my own anxieties, twisting my thoughts into knots as I glanced over my shoulder. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still there, lurking just beyond the reach of the moonlight. We need to find shelter, something to protect ourselves. The realization struck me. The well had released something into the world, and it wasn't satisfied with just a taste of fear. It craved more. As we stumbled through the dense underbrush, the landscape began to change. Gnarled branches twisted towards the sky, forming grotesque silhouettes against the moonlight, their roots clawing out of the ground like skeletal hands reaching for salvation. I couldn't help but think of the dark being that emerged from the well, its hollow longing for companionship still pulsing at the back of my mind. "Look," one of my friends pointed ahead, their voice trembling. I focused on the direction they indicated, and there, nestled amidst the trees, I saw an old, dilapidated shack. Its walls were warped and peeling, and the door hung askew, like a gaping mouth waiting to swallow us whole. "We have to check it out," I murmured, stepping closer. Each creak of the wood beneath my feet echoed ominously, amplifying the tension in my gut. It felt wrong, but staying out in the open seemed like an invitation for the darkness to come for us. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of mold and decay. The floorboards creaked ominously as we entered, each sound amplifying the sense of foreboding. I shuddered as I scanned the dimly lit space, my eyes falling upon strange markings etched into the walls, symbols that glowed just faintly, reminiscent of the carvings in the cabin. They felt alive, pulsating with an energy that both fascinated and horrified me. "What are those?" one of my friends whispered, drawing closer to inspect the drawings. I shook my head, unsure of what lurked within those twisted shapes. Suddenly, I froze, the hairs on my neck standing on end. Somewhere outside, I heard a low growl, deep and rumbling, vibrating through the very floor beneath us. My heart raced as the sound echoed again, more pronounced this time, and my body tensed instinctively. "We need to barricade the door," I urged, panic rising in my chest as flashes of the shadows tormented me anew. While my friends scrambled to find anything substantial to block the entrance, I felt an unshakable sense of dread. The shadows were close, too close. I could almost feel them coiling around the shack, eager to seep inside and engulf us once more. Just as we managed to secure the door with a rickety shelf, a deafening crash resonated from outside, shaking the foundation of the shack. A surge of panic fluttered in my stomach as I backed away, eyes darting toward the windows. I could see faint outlines weaving through the dark, undulating like smoke, moving with a purpose even I couldn't comprehend. "Please tell me you heard that," I urged, locking eyes with my friends. They nodded, faces pale and set with fear. The door rattled violently, as if something large was throwing itself against it, testing our feeble barricade. And then silence fell again, an oppressive kind that felt heavy in the air. I held my breath, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the sense of dread creeping into my thoughts. The door shuddered slightly, though not a sound escaped from the other side. I strained to hear footsteps, but there was only that dreadful stillness punctuated by the heavy thudding of my pulse. "We should find a way to defend ourselves," I suggested, scanning the room for anything we could use. An old axe hung on the wall, rusted but still intact. I grabbed it, feeling the weight of it as I turned back to my friends. "If something gets in, we need to be ready." They readied themselves, finding bits of old furniture they could use as makeshift shields. As we huddled together, the door rattled again, more insistently this time, like a beast hungry for entry. My heart sank, knowing the restless weight attached to each thud. Then, in one horrifying instant, the door burst open with a violent crash, splintering the wood and sending shards everywhere. Darkness spilled into the shack like a living thing, swirling and coiling, suffocating the light behind it. A scream caught in my throat as a figure stepped forward, shrouded in shadow, eyes glowing with an unholy light that burned brighter than the moon. I recoiled, clutching the axe tight as the entity moved closer, its form shifting unnaturally, blending into the very darkness that crept at its edges. "You shouldn't have come here," it hissed, voice like gravel grinding, filled with malice and hunger. "Get back!" I screamed, swinging the axe wildly, but the darkness swallowed the sound, thick and smothering. My friends backed away, faces frozen in terror, but I felt an instinct deep within to fight, to stand against the overwhelming tide. The creature lunged at me, its shadowy form stretching, twisting fingers reaching for my throat. I swung again, this time finding purchase against its dark skin, the axe biting deep and letting out a shriek so piercing it felt like it sliced through my mind. But instead of retreating, it only grew more furious, the shadows swirling around it growing denser and darker, fueled by its rage. "You cannot escape," it howled, and I felt the air grow colder, pinching my lungs. The world around me began to distort as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. I felt myself teetering on the edge, as if gravity had shifted and I was about to be pulled into a void from which there was no return. In that moment, an idea struck me, a desperate rush of clarity amidst the chaos. "Those symbols," I exclaimed, remembering the glowing markings etched onto the walls. A surge of hope flooded my chest at the thought. If we can activate them, maybe we can cast it out. But would it work? We had no idea what kind of power they held. Ignoring the pounding of my heart, I gestured to my friends. "We have to get to the wall. If we can channel whatever energy they hold." Regaining a sense of urgency, we rushed to the nearest wall, barely avoiding the thrashing shadow that sought to claw us down. As I touched the cold surface, a spark ignited beneath my fingers, the symbols flaring with light. "Concentrate. We need to chant." We gathered our voices, pouring all our terror and determination into the incantation that felt half-formed yet powerful in its resonance. The shadows tightened around us, screeching in fury as if they knew we were attempting to defy their hold. Gradually, light began to bloom, spilling out from the symbols and illuminating the shack with an otherworldly glow. I felt the pulse shift as the grip of darkness was momentarily weakened. Shadows recoiled, but the creature was relentless, lunging forward in one last desperate attempt to snatch us back into the void. "Now!" I shouted, feeling the energy surge through me, empowering our voices as we shouted in unison. The light burst forth, expanding like ripples across water, blasting against the approaching shadow. The creature howled in anguished fury, a chorus of lost voices screaming against the power we summoned. It flashed, and suddenly I was flung backward across the room, the energy consuming everything. The air crackled with electric intensity as the shadows began to split, twisting like smoke caught in a fierce wind. "Hold on!" I screamed, not knowing how I could keep my footing against the tide of darkness. The energy around us grew stronger, pushing back against the creature inch by inch, until finally we felt a shift, like the moment when dawn breaks through night. The entity shrieked one last time before bursting apart, scattering into a million swirling shadows that dissipated like mist. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by an unfathomable silence, the echoes of tension fading into the night. Breathing heavily, I looked around trying to process what had just occurred. Light flooded the shack fully now, dispelling the remnants of darkness that lingered. We all stood panting, shaken but alive, the victory burning brightly in our veins. Yet, as I caught my breath, a gnawing sense of unease crept back in. "Is it really over?" I whispered, the words slipping out before I could think. Silence greeted my question, but deep down, I understood. The shadows were clever, relentless, and while we had won this battle, the darkness would not rest. It would wait, lurking on the fringes of our minds, biding its time until we let our guard down. "Let's get out of here," I urged, my voice unsteady but firm. We had to move, to put distance between us and whatever malevolence still lingered in the woods. Together, we stepped out of the shack, hearts pounding as we faced the moonlight once more. The forest remained still, the tension transforming into an eerie calm. I swept my gaze over the twisted trees, looking for signs of movement, but felt only the wind brushing through the leaves, carrying echoes of our fear away. As we stumbled down the path, adrenaline still coursing through us, I couldn't help but feel the weight of our battle. The shadows may have retreated for now, but there was a deep certainty in my bones that this was only a pause before the next wave of terror crashed upon us. What else lay ahead in the depths of these woods? I couldn't help but think about the well and what had been awakened. A chill danced down my spine, but I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the here and now. "Stick together," I said, keeping my voice steady. "No matter what happens, we face it together." But even as I said those words, I sensed the lingering shadow, a dark seed lodged deep within me, waiting for the moment of weakness to sprout anew. And so, we marched ahead into the encroaching night, unaware of the greater darkness that was yet to be revealed. As we pressed deeper into the forest, a creeping tension engulfed us, an oppressive cloak that made breathing feel heavy. The silence wrapped around us like a shroud, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. My heart raced as shadows danced on the edges of my vision, reminiscent of the darkness we had just escaped. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, lurking just beyond the trees, hidden but always near. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and a chill ran down my spine. Each whisper of wind felt like a breath from some unseen creature, urging me to turn back, to flee the forest's grasp before it consumed us once more. "We have to keep moving," I said, trying to project confidence though my voice wavered slightly. I glanced back at my friends. Their faces were pale, marked by the fear that was becoming hard to hide. We had faced that dreadful entity, but had we truly escaped? After walking for what felt like an eternity, we came upon a narrow path, tangled in overgrown roots and moss. The trees loomed tall and twisted, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers reaching out for something lost. I felt drawn to the path, like it was calling me, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. A push to go forward overcame my better judgment, and that's when I noticed something shimmering in the distance. "What is that?" I asked, pointing ahead. There was a glint, a faint light emanating from an object lodged between two ancient trees. The desire to discover what lay ahead battled with the instinct to run, my heart pounding as I stepped closer. With every step, the air grew heavier, thick with anticipation and an undercurrent of dread. The glow from whatever was hidden ahead danced like a flickering flame, almost enchanting, but with a sinister undertone that tugged at my subconscious. I turned to my friends, uncertainty clouding my judgment. Should we check it out or keep going? They exchanged nervous glances, but one of them nodded slowly, clutching the makeshift weapon they had found. We approached the source of light cautiously, the pulse of fear thrumming through me, louder than before. As we neared, I felt a peculiar sensation pricking at the back of my mind, a memory just out of reach. Finally, I pushed aside the thick branches to reveal a small, weathered box covered in strange symbols similar to those etched in the shack. It lay on the ground, radiating a soft hue, inviting yet foreboding. "What do you think it is?" a friend asked, voice low and shaky. "I don't know," I replied, my pulse quickening as I knelt to inspect it. As I brushed away the dirt, the symbols glowed brighter, and I felt an inexplicable connection to the box, like it was alive and waiting for me. With a deep breath, I lifted the lid slightly, the hinges creaking as if they had been undisturbed for centuries. Inside lay a collection of small trinkets, crystals glowing faintly, a rusted key, and a memento that made my stomach churn. It was a small figurine, crafted from dark wood, depicting a grotesque face twisted in pain. I could feel the weight of eyes watching me from the darkness as I touched the figurine, a cold chill sweeping through me and leaving my hand shaking. With the realization creeping in, I looked at my friends, panic bubbling in my throat. "We should leave," I said, urgency filling my voice. But before we could react, the forest shuddered around us. The ground trembled as if it were alive, an unseen force pushing against us. Suddenly, a bone-chilling laugh echoed through the trees, mocking and sinister, a voice I recognized from my nightmares. "You think you can escape?" It taunted, a silhouette beginning to form among the twisted branches, becoming more defined as the glimmering light dimmed to nothing. My heart dropped, and I felt the world twist around me as shadows closed in, forcing me to reconsider our escape. "To the path! Now!" I shouted, feeling the inexorable pull of darkness as it tried to envelop me once more. We bolted down the narrow path, racing in fear as the wind howled in our ears, and branches reached for us like desperate hands. Just when I thought we had put enough distance between ourselves and the unseen entity, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps trailing behind us. Heavy, deliberate, echoing through the oppressive silence. Shivers ran down my spine, and I forced myself to run faster, adrenaline surging through my veins. "Don't look back," I urged, my voice cracking. But I felt the pull to glance over my shoulder, a sick curiosity tugging at my soul. When I finally succumbed to that urge, I wished I hadn't. The figure was there, trailing close, its featureless face contorted in a rictus grin. Its limbs were impossibly long, extending, unnaturally as it moved with grotesque fluidity through the underbrush. I stumbled and nearly fell, my friends grabbing my arms to steady me. "Keep going," one of them shouted, panic etched across their face as we pushed on, plunging deeper into the thicket. All around us, the shadows whispered, promising darkness and fear, enveloping us with their chilling voices. The forest twisted and turned like a labyrinth, and for a moment, I lost my sense of direction. Trees obscured the moonlight, creating shadows that danced and shifted like phantoms, disorienting me as I fought for footing. I could hear the laughter again, taunting and echoing painfully in my mind, wrapping around my thoughts and squeezing. Each roar echoed louder, drowning out my reason and fueling my fear as desperation clawed at my insides. Finally, we stumbled into a clearing, the moonlight spilling down like a beam of hope amidst the darkness. But the relief was short-lived. The clearing felt too still, too quiet, as if the shadows were holding their breath, watching us. I dropped to my knees, gasping for air, as my friends gathered around me, eyes wide with fear. We couldn't afford to linger. The figure could appear at any moment, and as the realization sunk in, I felt it in my bones. Suddenly, in the dim light, I spotted something glimmering in the far corner of the clearing, a large stone altar, half buried under vines and dirt. "What if we use it?" I suggested, struggling to form coherent thoughts. "We have to do something." As we moved closer, the altar seemed to pulse with energy, the worn surface etched with symbols resembling those from the shack and the box. A sense of urgency gripped me as I let my finger trace the intricacies carved deep within the stone. "Can it help us?" one friend wondered, and I nodded. "It has to. We need to channel whatever power this holds." Before we could ponder further, the darkness descended upon us like a tidal wave, engulfing the clearing in a cacophony of whispers. The low growl resonated from within, growing louder, and I felt the very ground beneath us rumble in anticipation. We gathered together in front of the altar, each of us channeling our fears and desires for an escape into the stone surface. I felt the energy building around us, rushing through me like a wildfire, igniting hope in my heart. "We must focus," I urged, trying to push fear aside. "Together, we can banish the shadows if we summon our light." The moment we raised our voices in unison again, the air crackled with energy, the symbols glowing brighter as the shadows writhed in agitation. I could feel the darkness pressing in, but a flicker of light burst from the altar, illuminating everything around us. And then, just as it began to swell, that laughter erupted anew, louder and more furious than before. "You think you can survive?" it bellowed, the voice echoing all around us, taunting us with the hopelessness that seemed impossible to shake. A cold wind whipped through the clearing, scattering the leaves and chilling the air. My heart raced violently as the shadows pushed against the light, frantic to reclaim their prey. I didn't know how much longer we could hold on, but I pushed that fear aside. "Don't give in," I screamed, feeling the bond with my friends strengthen as we fought against the endless tide of darkness. A luminous barrier flickered into being around us, holding the shadows at bay, but I could sense cracks forming as their dark energy intensified, threatening to engulf everything. In that critical moment, I understood something profound, a connection that transcended our immediate fears. We were more than individuals. We were a united force. Trust in each other, I shouted, eyes bright with determination. "We can do this. Together." With one final push, we poured our energy into the altar. The air crackled with a blinding light as the shadows shrieked in mad fury, fighting against an awakening they couldn't comprehend. I felt the tension release, the battle's weight finally shifting as light surged forward. All at once, the darkness recoiled, howling as if it were being torn apart. And just like that, the entity that haunted us began to fade into the ether, a mist of shadows dissipating into the night. We stood there, panting, the adrenaline still coursing through our veins, but something had changed. The air felt lighter, and even the woods fell silent, whispering no longer. Yet in the depths of my heart, a voice whispered a warning. What had we truly defeated? As we gathered our strength and steadied ourselves, I remained acutely aware of the darkness lurking beyond the edges of our victory. "Should we go back?" I asked, dread creeping into my mind. Before anyone could respond, a chilling breeze swept through the clearing, causing our skin to prickle with unease once more. As the moon hung high above, I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounter was far from over. "Let's stay close," I urged, driven by the need to protect my friends. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears, each thud reminding me of the fragile peace we had won and the looming struggle yet to come. We began to move away from the altar cautiously, not wanting to draw attention back to us. I could feel the lingering shadows skittering just out of sight, and a profound sense of foreboding clawed at my mind. Once again, we ventured deeper into the forest, uncertainty shadowing our every move. We moved slowly, the path beneath our feet now seeming to pulse with an unsettling energy, like the very ground was alive and aware of our presence. The trees closed in around us, branches intertwining above like skeletal arms, blocking out the moonlight and making the air feel thick and suffocating. I felt a shiver creep up my spine, a feeling of being hunted lingering in the back of my mind, as shadows danced just outside my peripheral vision. "Is anyone else feeling that?" I whispered, casting a glance at my friends. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with fear, and I could see they felt it too, the oppressive weight of the unseen. Like we're not alone? A hushed silence fell over us as we strained to listen, each of us holding our breath. The rustling of leaves soon transformed into whispers, hushed voices that floated through the air, curling around us like smoke. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear, malicious and mocking, like a chorus of disembodied spirits. "What is that?" One friend managed to choke out, their voice shaking. I shook my head, trying to dispel the rising tide of fear. Whatever we had awakened with our tampering at the altar was far from done with us. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from somewhere in the darkness, reverberating through the trees, sending a wave of primal panic coursing through me. I felt the instinct to run pulse through my body, but my feet stayed rooted to the ground. "We need to move," I insisted, forcing myself to break the spell of paralyzing fear. Just as we began to pick up the pace, the whispering intensified, malicious laughter ringing out, shrill and disconcerting. Each cackle chilled me to the bone, sending a wave of nausea through my stomach. My heartbeat quickened, matching the frantic rhythm of my thoughts as we stumbled deeper into the suffocating embrace of the woods. And then I saw it, In the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement. I turned my head, and my breath caught in my throat. The shadows shifted, coalescing in the shape of something humanoid standing just beyond the trees. It had no face, just empty dark holes where eyes should be, but I felt its gaze pierce through me. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, as it lifted an elongated arm in our direction, fingers extending like skeletal claws. "Run!" I screamed, adrenaline overriding any sense of rational thought. We bolted through the underbrush, the sound of my friend's hurried footsteps pounding against the earth. I didn't dare look back, afraid of facing whatever horror pursued us. But I felt its presence, a cold breath against the back of my neck urging me onward. The sounds of the forest morphed into a cacophony of chaos. The snapping of twigs, the rustling of leaves, and the relentless howling of the wind blending into a terrifying symphony. Ahead, the trees began to thin, and I could see a faint glimmer of light breaking through the darkness. It beckoned to me like a distant star, a symbol of hope that pushed me forward. But as I raced toward the light, the whispers grew louder, swirling around me, drowning out everything else. "You can't escape," they taunted, echoing in my mind, each word woven with shadows. Finally, I broke through the trees and stumbled into a clearing, the moonlight flooding around us like a warm embrace. But the relief was short-lived. The radius of light seemed to pulse, flicker, and I realized it wasn't just the moon. It was something else, something unnatural. In the very center of the clearing lay a deep pit, the edges lined with stones engraved in the same symbols we had seen before. The pit exuded a darkness, so deep it seemed to absorb the light, forming a vortex that pulled at the shadows around it. "What is that?" one friend asked, voice trembling as they clutched my arm. I shook my head, unable to form the words. Shadows flickered at the edges of the pit, twisting and writhing as if alive, calling to us, promising secrets hidden in its depths. An overwhelming dread washed over me as I took a step back, instinct urging me to retreat. But then, from the depths of the pit, a low growl echoed, the sound reverberating through my bones. It wasn't just an animal sound. It felt like the voice of the forest itself, filled with rage and hunger. I felt it in my chest, an ache of primal fear, as if I could sense the creature emerging from the darkness, clawing its way out. Suddenly, the air turned icy, and I could see my breath forming visible puffs in the cold air. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and I caught sight of a monstrous form beginning to rise, shadowy tendrils wrapping around it like serpents. Snap! A branch broke behind us, and I turned just in time to see another shadow, a figure rushing toward us from the tree-line, ravenous and feral. "This way!" I shouted, grabbing my friends and pulling them toward the opposite side of the clearing, away from the encroaching shadows. But the moment we turned, the pit erupted. A plume of darkness shot upward, casting a veil over the moonlight and swallowing the clearing whole. The pit yawned like a mouth, an abyss hungry for more than just light. It craved our fear, our despair. My heart raced as I felt the shadows pressing against me, their chills seeping into my skin. "Keep moving!" I yelled again as we dashed to the far edge of the clearing, desperately searching for an escape from the growing nightmare. The figures chased us relentlessly, lingering just at the fringe of our vision, taunting us with their spectral forms. Suddenly, a shriek erupted from above, and I looked up to see the shape of the creature looming over us, its eyes glowing with a sickly light. It was a ghastly amalgamation of human and shadow, limbs twisted and elongated, a mockery of life. I stumbled, nearly tripping as the air thickened around me. In desperation, I spotted an old path leading off to the side, winding away deeper into the woods. "This way! We can't let it catch us!" I urged, fear propelling us forward as we barreled down the path, the shadows clawing at our backs. The woods seemed to close in again, thorns reaching out as if to ensnare us, but we had no choice. We had to push through the thorny underbrush, brambles tearing at our clothes, leaving small cuts as reminders of the nightmare that chased us. With every step, the darkness followed, whispering, promising to reclaim us, but the thought of that abomination catching us spurred me on. Each heartbeat echoed in my ears, mingling with the whispers that taunted my sanity. Keep going. We're almost there. But just when it felt like we might escape, the woods shook violently, and a deafening roar erupted from behind. I could feel the ground tremble, and I glanced back, heart sinking as I saw the creature now racing toward us, its body undulating like a wave of shadows. It was relentless, an embodiment of all nightmares given flesh. We reached the narrow path that seemed to lead us away from the pitch-black pit. I could feel hope flickering inside, but the eerie laughter echoed anew, sending chills right down my spine. In that moment of terror, I knew I had to confront this nightmare head-on. "We can't let it win," I shouted, rallying whatever courage I had left. We had fought through so much, and we weren't going to back down now. It would take everything we had to hold the darkness at bay. I turned, weapon raised, determined not to let it consume our hope. There was no escape hidden here. We had to fight. And as that thought cleaved into my mind, renewed strength surged through my veins, propelling me forward into the darkness one last time. As I stood there, heart pounding like a drum, I could feel an electric energy coursing through me. The creature loomed ahead, a solid mass of shadows swirling in grotesque shapes. Its hollow eye sockets glowed with a feral light, piercing through the darkness like lasers searching for prey. I could sense my friends tagging along behind me. Their breaths quickened, fear palpable in the air as they fought to keep up. "What do we do?" One of them gasped, voices shaking, confusion boiling over in the heat of panic. I had no solid answers, only a desperate determination to fight back. I tightened my grip on the weapon I had found, its cold metal reassuring against my clammy palms. The whispers of the shadows swirled louder now, mocking our resolve. "Foolish children," the voices hissed, echoing in tones that sent chills running down my spine. "You can't defeat the darkness. You belong to us." In that moment, fury erupted within me, fueling my resolve. "Get ready," I shouted, turning to face the creature straight on, leveling my makeshift weapon at it, as if sheer will could drive it back. I felt an intense pulse of energy within the clearing, a moment of clarity in the chaos. The ancient symbols etched around us flickered to life, glowing briefly like embers igniting under pressure. The creature lunged forward, shadows coiling and unraveling, its long limbs stretching unnaturally towards us. It moved with a fluidity that defied nature, terrifyingly graceful and horrifying all at once. I had just a second to react as I hurled the weapon towards the advancing mass, the metallic clang ringing out like a death knell. To my horror, the weapon sailed through the air and vanished into the thick, swirling darkness, swallowed whole by the creature as if it had never existed. I stumbled back. Fear surged, but something snapped within me. "We can't let it take us." Across my field of vision, I spotted a large branch lying on the ground. "Over there!" I shouted, pointing to my friend nearby, urgency lacing my voice. Desperation surged in my chest as they grabbed it, gripping it like a lifeline, ready to fight back against the eerie force closing in around us. The air around us thickened, charged with a tension that made my skin crawl as I took a step forward, holding my ground defiantly. The darkness churned, as if sensing our determination, rippling ominously at the edges. The creature's laughter grew louder, filled with a triumphant glee, and my friends began to tremble beside me. "We're not afraid of you," I shouted, gathering every ounce of strength I could muster. The shadows paused, almost recoiling at my words, as if testing the resolve in my heart. I felt a flicker of bravery ignite within me, the warmth of camaraderie binding us together against this nightmarish foe. With one swift movement, my friend swung the branch, aiming directly at the mass of darkness. "Stay back," they cried, shouting like warriors waging a battle, hoping our fragile strength could hold out against the night. But the darkness coiled back, absorbing the impact, as if it were but a playful breeze against a mountain. Then, out of nowhere, a shrill cry tore through the silence, sending shockwaves through my bones. I turned just in time to catch a glimpse of a small shadow darting between the trees behind us. A feeble creature, barely retaining its form, shifting and flickering like a dying flame. It was a tangible manifestation of the fear we had been chasing, a specter trying to find solace in the darkness. "What is that?" I caught myself whispering, captivated despite the overwhelming urge to run. Suddenly, the pit behind us emitted an otherworldly growl, and a wave of despair washed over me, warning me that we were being encircled. The elemental density hung thick in the air, making it hard to breathe, and the oppressive aura loomed behind like a curtain slowly closing in. Shadows slipped around us, whispering promises of dread and despair, whispering lies that we would never escape this nightmare. In a fit of panic, we turned to run, falling on instinct to follow the narrow path that cut through the underbrush. Darkness surged behind us, a frantic pursuit, threatening to swallow us. I could hear heavy breathing, a guttural sound that resonated through the trees like some grotesque symphony building to a crescendo. As we dashed forward, the line of trees seemed to blur, distorting reality itself. I could barely see through the growing shadows, and a panic-laden thought crossed my mind. Were we running towards safety or into another trap? We rounded a bend in the path, only to find ourselves confronting a sheer drop. An unforgiving cliff overlooking a dark, swirling river below, its surface reflecting the gloom of the moon above. There was nowhere else to go. We were cornered. My stomach twisted painfully as I peered over the edge, fear gripping me. "We can't go back," my friend shouted, desperation thick in their voice. "We can't be trapped here." Ahead, the shadows writhed closer, pushing us toward the brink, and instinct kicked in. I took a step back and turned to find a tangle of roots hanging down the cliffside, a possible way to descend. "We have to climb down," I urged, voice trembling but steadied by the desperate need to escape. We had to move quickly before the horror behind us clung like a shroud, too close for comfort. There was a moment of hesitation. It felt like an eternity trapped in the stillness before a storm, but the moment was fleeting. Together, we braced ourselves, gripping the roots and starting our descent down the damp, jagged cliff. I could feel the smooth, cold bark slipping beneath my hands, the shadows creeping impossibly close, as if they could sense our fear. Swallowing hard, I focused on the ground below, imagining safety with every inch we climbed down. The branches creaked beneath us, echoing the sounds of our frantic hearts, each heartbeat synchronizing with the pounding of the dark creature just above us. The whispers grew louder, swirling around like a gust of wind, mingling with the sound of rushing water, casting us into a deeper haze of confusion. "Faster!" I urged, urging my friends onward. Just as we inched closer to the final ledge, a low growl echoed again, vibrating through the ground, and suddenly the roots began to loosen beneath us. "Hold on!" I cried out as we dangled precariously, adrenaline soaring as we scrambled to avoid falling into the dark waters below. In a frantic motion, we pushed ourselves, landing with a thud on solid ground. I quickly glanced back, dread pooling in my stomach as I saw the shadows crawling closer, like a dark wave washing over the edge. We had only a moment of respite before the creature erupted from above, shattering the earth where we once hung. With that terrifying roar echoing through the air, we turned to run into the thicket, the branches snapping at our heels, the shadows spreading like wildfire. There was no choice but to delve deeper into this new nightmare, the darkness behind us still hungry for our fears. And as we ran, I felt it again, an unsettling awareness creeping along my spine, whispering things I wished I didn't hear. Despite it, we couldn't give in. Not now. A flicker of hope burned within me, a hope that guided my friends and me through the chaos, urging us onward deeper into the tangled web of what lay ahead. The thicket closed in around us like a living wall, branches clawing at my clothes, attempting to snatch us back into the darkness. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears as I pushed forward, the fear of being captured completely consuming my thoughts. We maneuvered through the chaos, desperate to put distance between us and that lurking horror. "Where do we go?" I gasped, voice strained as I glanced back. The shadows loomed, threatening to spill over the edge of the riverbank, writhing like angry serpents eager to reclaim their prey. We can't keep running without a plan. No one had an answer, just a shared terror reflected in their wide eyes. I spotted a flicker of light in the distance, something that shimmered like a beacon in the dark. "There," I pointed. "Let's head toward that light." We veered in its direction, adrenaline pushing us onward with renewed urgency. The forest seemed to whisper secrets, the wind weaving through the trees, carrying eerie sounds that chilled me to the bone. As we moved closer, the light shifted, revealing an opening, a clearing bathed in a ghostly glow. When we finally emerged, the sight sent chills racing down my spine. An ancient stone structure lay before us, its surfaces covered in strange, intricate carvings that pulsed faintly, as if alive. It felt like a place where time stood still, unaware of the chaos roiling outside its border. "What is this place?" one of my friends whispered, eyes wide with awe and fear. Something deep inside warned me not to approach, something dark and lurking just on the periphery of our understanding. I took cautious steps forward, half drawn by the inexplicable pull of the light. The atmosphere in the clearing shifted again, and shadows twisted at the edges, creeping closer, blocking the light as if afraid we might discover something we weren't meant to. "Don't go too far," another friend urged, grabbing my arm just before I reached the nearest stone. "It feels wrong." Their voice trembled, but I could see fascination battling fear in their eyes. Before I could respond, a deafening crack roared through the air, shaking the ground beneath our feet. I stumbled back, the light flickering dangerously as the ancient structure seemed to awaken, emitting low groans as if it were alive, reminding me that we might have disturbed something far older than ourselves. "We should go," I said urgently, uncertainty creeping in. Whatever we've unleashed might not like being stirred, but as we turned to run, the shadows converged around us, encircling the clearing like a fog. They roiled and slithered, forming shapes that felt almost human, their forms shifting and twisting in ways that sent my heart racing. I felt trapped, my body instinctively tensing as the shrill cacophony of whispers grew louder, echoing our fears back to us. "We need to move now," I shouted, my voice cracking as panic seized my chest. In that moment, fear melded with the creeping shadows, combining into a force that felt alive, thirsting for our dread. We bolted toward the edge of the clearing, but the shadows lunged, reaching out, and I could feel their cold breath on my skin as I ducked out of the way. One friend was not quick enough. They stumbled, falling to the ground with a cry. "Help!" Their voice echoed, flooded with terror as the shadows tightened around them. I couldn't think. I pushed myself harder, reaching for my friend, but the shadows closed in, devouring them whole. Their cries pierced the air, a sound that resonated deep within me, twisting and gnawing at my sanity. "No! No!" I screamed, desperate to save them. But we couldn't look back. Terror propelled us forward into the maze of the forest again, branches tearing at my skin as the last echoes of my friends' cries faded into silence. The darkness felt heavier now, and I dared to glance back one last time. The clearing behind me was swirling with shadows, the ancient structure towering ominously, its carvings pulsating, almost laughing at our agony. It felt like we had passed through a veil, and I was irrevocably tied to the terror of what lay behind me. Stumbling deeper into the woods, I felt my pace falter, exhaustion weighing down my limbs. We were past the point of running aimlessly. Somehow, we needed to regain control over our surroundings. It was time to confront the shadows head-on and put an end to this nightmare. There was a sudden rustle nearby, snapping me from my thoughts. My heart raced as I squinted through the dense, dark foliage. A figure appeared, a fleeting glimpse laced with familiar contours. I held my breath, realizing with a mixture of hope and dread that it was another person in the woods. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky, echoing through the quiet. But before I could get a response, the figure dissolved into shadow, leaving a sense of emptiness behind. I felt my gut twist. I was losing my grip on reality, and the line between friend and shadow blurred. Just then, a sound pierced the silence. A distorted laugh like a twisted melody drifting through the air, wrapping around me like a shroud. It was chilling enough that it gripped me, forcing me to look around frantically for the source. "They're coming for you," a voice and tone from the shadows, slithering into my ear like poison. "You can't escape. You'll join your friends soon." The air grew colder, and I felt a surge of anger and despair entwine in my chest. "No!" I shouted, my voice trembling with the weight of my emotions. "I won't let you take me." Fueled by a rush of defiance, I surged forward, crashing through the branches, fighting against the draw of the shadows that threatened to wrap around me. Each step felt like I was treading on shaky ground, but the growing voice inside urged me to keep going. There had to be a way out of this nightmare. But then I caught sight of something glimmering ahead, a glimmer of hope, or perhaps yet another illusion. As I drew closer, the gleam morphed into a solid object, a small stone with the same symbols as the ones I had seen before. It radiated an otherworldly energy, shimmering with a pulsing light. "What are you?" I asked breathlessly, reaching out to touch it. Instantly, a jolt of energy surged through me, filling me with warmth, pushing back at the encroaching shadows. The whispers quieted momentarily, replaced by a stillness that hung in the air. But I knew I couldn't linger. I had to rally my strength and my friends, with this newfound sensation coursing through me. "We're going to fight back," I yelled, gripping the stone tightly, willing its energy to flow through me. Looking back through the forest, I envisioned a way to confront the shadows collectively. As my friends came back into view, I caught the glimmer of fear in their expressions, locked with confusion and dread. "I found something." I held it aloft, feeling hopeful. "This can help us." With a shared glance of determination, we prepared to stand against the rising tide of darkness, knowing this was our moment to reclaim what had been lost. Together, we stepped forward, ready to face the unrelenting shadows that tried to consume us. As the creature's laughter echoed ominously in the distance, we stood tall, united by our resolve, ready to confront the nightmare head-on. With the stone glowing in my hand, I felt a surge of courage wrap around me like a warm blanket, pushing back against the overwhelming dread that festooned the air. My friends stood by my side, their eyes wide, a mixture of hope and fear flickering within them. "This has to mean something, right?" I urged, waving the stone slightly as if it could ward off the shadows creeping closer. The atmosphere crackled with energy, and I could feel the shadows pulling away, recoiling as if they were afraid of what this light could do. As I focused, the dim light began to respond, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The whispers had hushed momentarily, uncertainty hanging in the air, but an ominous feeling loomed like a thunderstorm ready to unleash. I knew the stillness wouldn't last long. Whatever had chased us through the forest would not be deterred easily. Suddenly, from the trees, a rustling broke the silence. The noise snapped me out of my trance, and my heart pounded wildly once more. I could see dark shapes stirring in the distance, coiling and curling, forming into hideous figures cloaked in the shadows. Panic surged, and I felt the weight of helplessness return. "What do we do?" a friend whispered, fear trembling in their voice. I turned to them, steadying my own heart, knowing I had to be the anchor for everyone here. "We face them together," I replied, clenching the stone tight, its energy coursing through me with renewed intensity. It felt like a promise that maybe we could find a way to break free. As the figures lumbered closer, I could see their grotesque forms, elongated limbs, shadowy bodies, and faces twisted in agony. They seemed to shift at the edges, as if they were not solid, but fragmented pieces of darkness hoping to draw us into their abyss. "Stay close," I commanded, gripping the stone harder. As we formed a circle, the radiance illuminating our faces, barely touching the encroaching gloom. But the shadows pressed in, whispering devastated words that wrapped around our minds like ivy. "You can't escape your fate," one voiced, a low, rumbling sound that felt like gravel scraping against metal. The heat of despair burned in my chest, but I wasn't about to let it overtake me. "Shut up," I shouted defiantly, flicking the stone as if to disperse them. The pulse of light shot from it, cutting through the shadows. For a brief moment, I could see an opening, a fleeting glimpse of the path leading deeper into the woods, unfurling like a promise of safety. "Right there," I yelled, nodding toward the crack in the darkness where the light dared to shine. "Let's get out of here." We ran toward the opening, the shadows behind us groaning in fury. As we merged into the light, I felt a rush of energy pulsing from the stone, buoying my spirit. As we pressed forward, each step brought us further away from the dark grasp threatening to clutch at our heels. But the shadows were relentless, tendrils flailing outward like grasping hands trying to reclaim their prize. I could hear their angry hisses escalate as they struggled against the light. The sound struck a chord of fear in me, and I began to doubt our path. Was this really an escape, or merely leading us deeper into their trap? A sudden thud echoed, shaking the ground beneath our feet. I stumbled, nearly falling, and looked back to see a massive figure clawing its way through the thick darkness, emerging from the shadows like a monstrous wraith. Its eyes glowed with pure malice, locking onto us as if it had been waiting for this moment. "Run! Keep running!" I shouted, a surge of adrenaline surging through my veins. We hurtled forward, breaking from the grasp of the shadows, the opening narrowing behind us. As I pushed through the dense undergrowth, my mind whirled. I could feel the creature's presence looming closer, every instinct screaming that we wouldn't be able to outrun it forever. The forest was alive with darkness, branches snagging at us, desperate to pull us back into its suffocating embrace. Then, just as we crossed through a thicket, I stumbled upon something unexpected, a weathered sign hidden beneath layers of moss. Its letters, worn but discernible, read, "Beware the heart of darkness." My stomach dropped as I realized the weight of what it could mean. "We can't stay here," I said, trying to rally my thoughts. "Whatever this heart is, we need to find it and figure out how to destroy it. It must be what fuels this nightmare." The shadows thrashed behind us, but the light from the stone pulsed with vigor, guiding us onward. We had no choice. We had to face whatever was waiting ahead, head on and united. As we pressed through the underbrush, our path glowed eerily, illuminating the way forward like a warning beacon. The trees twisted higher, the shadows swirling beside us as if trying to obscure our chance of escape. "What do you think is waiting out there?" a friend asked, the tremor in their voice mirroring the unease swirling in me. "I don't know," I admitted, heart hammering, "but it's our only option. We have to find it before it finds us." Pushing deeper into the heart of the forest, I felt the atmosphere thicken, draping around us like a suffocating cloak. The underbrush gave way to a larger clearing, bathed in ghostly light, every branch seeming to stretch out in warning, even the wind whispering secrets of ancient terrors. In the center stood a massive stone formation, jagged and foreboding, pulsating ominously with the same symbols that adorned the small stone. It glowered against the creeping shadows surrounding it, a heart of containment for an evil force that felt maddeningly powerful. "We have to destroy it," I said, conviction lacing my tone. "If we can weaken the shadows, we might stand a chance." Each of us exchanged apprehensive glances, supporting one another with silent nods as we approached the altar, wariness blending with the creeping excitement of possibility. As I raised the glowing stone high, aiming it toward the dark heart, I felt an electric energy course through my bones. The shadows coiled tighter, haunted whispers clawing at the back of my mind, trying to break my focus, but I wouldn't be shaken. "Together!" I shouted, feeling the power of my friends surrounding me, anchoring me in this terrifying moment. With that, I slammed the stone down against the cold surface, unleashing our shared energy in a brilliant explosion of light. The shadows shrieked in agony, swirling wildly, their piercing screams seemingly echoing forever. The entire world spun, engulfed in light and shadow, the air crackling with energy. I closed my eyes against the blinding brightness, praying we hadn't unleashed something worse. And just as suddenly, everything stopped, suspended in a tense moment, my heart racing in the silence. With bated breath, I opened my eyes again to find the shadows recoiling, jerking back from the radiant burst. The stone at the altar imploded, radiant light engulfing the space, illuminating the darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. But the battle wasn't over. From the remnants of the shattered stone, a thick, shadowy figure emerged, twisting and howling, its forms pulsating and shifting grotesquely. This was the heart of darkness, taking form, and all my fears converged into a singular realization. We were drawing closer to a conclusion to this nightmare, one way or another, and there was no turning back now. As the dark figure coiled before us, it radiated an energy that was cold and suffocating, an overwhelming presence that pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. Twisted limbs reached out as if searching, grasping for something to snatch away. My heart thundered in my ears as I stood frozen momentarily, watching it swirl and convulse. Shadows danced around it like flames, each flicker revealing glimpses of the horrors it contained. Screaming faces that echoed with anguished cries, memories of those who had been lost. "What do we do?" I heard one friend whisper, their voice quaking with fear that mirrored my own. I could feel the air growing heavier as the entity roared, a sound that rumbled through the ground beneath us, making my bones vibrate. "We fight," I said, summoning the strength to take a step forward, the stone still glowing brightly in the palm of my hand, its warmth a small comfort against the oppressive darkness. Everyone rallied around me, creating a barrier against the encroaching shadows. I could feel their fears mingling with mine, a potently powerful concoction that fueled an urgency inside me. Together, we had to face this terror, whatever it was, and reclaim what had been stolen. "Focus on the light. Use it," I urged, the words spilling out with conviction. "We can channel our energy through the stone." We joined hands, a trembling circle of resolve, feeling the pulsating vibrations coursing through our skin as I pressed the stone harder against the ground. It shone brighter, reflecting our shared strength, bathing us in a golden glow that pushed back the shadows just a little. But the dark figure shrieked in fury, lunging toward us, its form shifting and roiling in a twisted dance of rage. The ground beneath us cracked, fissures opening like to swallow us whole. We could see the depths of the shadows swirling beneath, beckoning, promising an end to our suffering if we just let go. "Stay strong," I yelled, feeling the desperate need to anchor my friends in that moment. "We can do this. I know we can." With that, we focused on the light, pouring our fears and hopes into the stone. It pulsed with intensity, a heartbeat of its own, illuminating the encroaching darkness. As the light grew, the screams from the dark figure grew sharper, warning us that we were stepping into a battle we might not survive. The figure writhed, momentarily retreating, until it shook itself, scattering shadows like exploding ash. A thick, viscous fog surged forward, tendrils twisting around our ankles, attempting to suck us back into its depths. I felt a cold grip on my leg, ice creeping up my skin, panic bubbling within me. "Don't let it pull you down," I shouted, trying to rally against the encroaching doom. I could feel the fear wrapping around me, pulling at my heart like a vice. With frantic energy, I responded to the darkness urging, "You are nothing but a memory. You don't own us." The words exploded from my mouth like a challenge. At that moment, The stone erupted with brilliant light, casting away the shadows momentarily. I could see clearer now, the dark figure hesitating, as if it was unsure whether to advance or retreat. "Keep pushing," I yelled. "Focus on the light." With every ounce of strength, we fed the stone, feeling hope and warmth radiate from it. But then the shadows struck back, lashing out like whips. A dark tendril shot toward me, wrapping around my wrist with a frostbite grip that shot pain up my arm. I gasped, pulling at it instinctively, the sheer umbilical connection yanking harder, testing my resolve as wisps of despair flickered in front of my eyes. "Help me!" I cried out, caught in the snare, feeling the chill of darkness threatening to consume me whole. Without hesitation, my friends surged toward me, their collective strength a burning lifeline. They grabbed hold of me, pulling me back with one hand while weaving the other toward the stone, channeling all the light they could muster through me. As the power surged, I felt an explosion of warmth explode through my body. The shadows recoiled, releasing me as if burnt by the light. I spun back, breathless, and gazed at the dark figure. "You won't win this," I shouted, a fierce determination rising within. The heart of darkness roared, and I noticed something in the madness, a flicker of vulnerability hidden beneath its tormented surface. The swirling shadows seemed to lose their cohesion. They were losing strength against the relentless glow of our unity. "Channel everything we have," I urged my friends. "We can't let it regain its power." We joined hands again, hearts pounding in sync, fear transforming into pure defiance. I pressed the glowing stone into the earth, summoning every ounce of courage, every ounce of hope, focusing on our fears, but channeling them into defiance instead. The entity trembled, shadows convulsing as if it was shaking off its own existence. It seemed we had struck a chord deep within it, rattling the very essence of its being. I could see the chaos swirling in its form start to dissolve, shadows dissipating like smoke caught in a breeze. Suddenly, the dark figure surged, lunging toward us with renewed ferocity, anger radiating from every ripple of darkness. It wasn't done yet. It was desperate, and that made it dangerous. "Brace yourselves," I shouted, trying to hold my ground, my friends all straining against the invisible tide. The shadows whipped around us violently, clashing like thunder, echoing with anger and a primal scream that shook the air. The pressure built and everything seemed to spin. I closed my eyes against the storm, focusing on the warmth radiating from the stone, the shared energy fueling our fight, giving life to our resolve. I envisioned the shadows shrinking, crumbling into nothingness under the force of our combined will. In that moment, my mind cleared, all sense of doubt and fear fading. I remember my friend who had been taken, the laughter consumed by darkness. I could not let this happen again, not to us or anyone else. I opened my eyes and looked at the writhing figure with fierce determination. "You're nothing," I roared, my voice cutting through the chaos. "You'll never take us again." Feeling a surge of energy, I drew deeply from the stone, sending a powerful pulse through the air. The shadows cried out, twisting violently as the wave of light rushed toward them. The darkness fought back. A terrible vortex of fury and despair surged around us. Yet, we pushed harder, the light intensifying, breaking through like a sunrise upon the dawn. With one final effort, I flung the stone forward, a brilliant beacon cutting through the very heart of the dark figure. And in that crucial moment, everything erupted into a blinding expanse of light and sound, leaving nothing behind but a primal scream of anguish. The shadows dissolved, unraveling into nothing. The darkness fractured like glass, shattering under pressure, releasing a burst of energy that sent us sprawling to the ground. I gasped for breath, feeling warmth seep into my skin where the icy grip had clawed at me. The echoes of horror faded, and I found myself in the sudden, brilliant silence of the clearing. "Did we?" One friend panted beside me, eyes wide and disbelieving as we slowly helped each other up, shaking off the remnants of fear that still wrapped around us like a fog. I think we did, I managed, looking back at the now empty space where the shadowy figure had stood. With the darkness lifted, the ornate stone structure, illuminated by the remnants of our light, now appeared majestic instead of menacing. But as the reality of our victory settled in, an unsettling whisper brushed against the edge of my consciousness. Something nagging deep within me as I surveyed the forest now slowly melding back into its natural beauty. The shadows had receded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only a temporary reprieve. "We have to go," I stated firmly, the instinct to flee surging within me. There might be more lurking in the dark. We gathered our breath and collected ourselves, the remnants of fear lingering as we turned to leave the clearing. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the shadows lingering at the edges of my mind like a half-remembered nightmare. In our haste, I blocked out the whispers that teased at the edges of my consciousness, pushing forward as the trees began to close around us again, dark branches looming overhead. I felt an undeniable heaviness in the air, as if we hadn't truly escaped, merely stepped out of one darkness and into another. "Stay tight," I cautioned as we stepped into the thicket, adrenaline pumping. Somehow, I could sense that the heart of darkness might not have been fully vanquished after all. It had just retreated, regrouping in the shadows. As we pushed onward, I feared we might not be done with this nightmare. A feeling in the pit of my stomach told me that the darkness might return, more dangerous than before. And beneath the surface of the forest, the echoes of what we had faced still reverberated, a promise that the shadows would return as long as fear still held sway in our hearts. As we made our way deeper into the forest, something felt off, like the air had thickened around us, a heavy blanket of unease. Every rustle in the underbrush pulled at my nerves, and I could hear my friends breathing harder, their unease mirroring my own. "Are we sure this is the right way?" one friend asked, glancing back at the path we had just taken. I nodded, though doubt gnawed at me like a beast. The comforting glow of the stone had dimmed in our hands, the light fading away like a dying ember, leaving us vulnerable to the shadows creeping at the edges of the trees. Suddenly, the wind picked up, swirling through the branches with an eerie howling that carried whispers in its wake. The sounds were unintelligible, yet they tugged at my mind, evoking memories I couldn't entirely recall. Laughter, then cries, as if the forest itself held on to sorrow like a secret. "Did you hear that?" my friend whispered, frozen between terror and disbelief. I nodded, heart racing, straining my ears to catch the whispers floating through the air. They felt like fingers brushing against my skin, cold and wet, almost tangible in their call. Ahead, the shadows stretched longer, the trees leaning over as if they were part of a conspiracy, and I couldn't shake the notion that we were being watched. The sun was trying to set, casting strange angles and flickering lights through the canopy, and each flicker felt like a warning, punctuated by the deepening dark that loomed ever closer. "Maybe we should turn back," another friend suggested, fear lacing their voice. In my gut, I felt the urgency, an instinct that told me returning might not guarantee our safety either. "We have to keep moving. We need to find a way out." As we forged onward, the thick underbrush began to thicken, grasping at our legs like grasping hands, dragging us back as if the forest was trying to claim us. My heart pounded louder with each step, terror clawing its way up my throat. The whispers grew, becoming clearer, more pronounced, chanting our names, and it sent chills racing down my spine. "It knows us!" I gasped, panic rising as we pushed through the trees, the feeling of being surrounded closing in. Suddenly, a branch snapped loudly behind us, echoing through the otherwise suffocating silence, and we all spun around, hearts racing in unison. But nothing stood there, just darkness. Yet that darkness felt alive, pulsing with a sinister energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. "We should stick together," I urged, trying to keep us grounded amidst the chaos swirling in my head. "We need to remember what we faced. We beat it once." And as if mocking my confidence, another cry erupted from the shadows, a sound so heart-wrenching that it paralyzed me with fear. It was like the forest laid claim to the sorrow of its lost souls, and I felt the weight of despair crush down on my chest. Each heartbeat echoed the call, becoming a countdown to something terrible. Suddenly, the ground dipped beneath us, and I stumbled, dropping the stone. It tumbled away, rolling into the darkness. I lunged after it, only to feel the ground shift beneath me as I lost my footing, tumbling into a small pit that opened beneath the foliage. The breath knocked out of me. I landed hard, the impact sending ripples of pain through my body. "Are you okay?" I heard my friends call from above, panic straining their voices. I looked up to see their faces twisted with fear, shadows flickering around their forms. "I'm fine," I shouted back, my voice hoarse and tremulous. But even as I spoke, an unsettling thought crossed my mind. Was I fine? It was almost too quiet down here, a stillness that felt unnatural, as if the monsters had sensed my isolation. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet, glancing around to assess my surroundings in the darkness that felt alive, the silence ringing like a bell. "Guys, can you help me up?" I yelled, trying to sound confident even as dread clawed at my insides. Instead of the expected laughter and encouragement, I heard eerie whispers creeping closer, louder now, echoing darkly, forming words that sent icy chills running down my spine. "Help not for you." Panic surged through me. The ground suddenly trembled, and I stumbled backward, colliding against the rough wall of the pit. The whispers grew deafening, chanting as if the entire forest had turned against me. I could see shadows creeping along the edges of the pit, coiling like snakes, ready to strike. "Get away from me!" I screamed, my voice shrill and raw. Desperation clawed at my throat as I searched for something, anything to hold on to. I had to escape, and I needed to find that light again. I strained to peer into the darkness, scanning for the stone that had fallen. As I reached out, my fingers brushed against something slick and cold. Something that didn't feel like stone, but smooth and undulating, almost alive. Drawing back in horror, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "No, no!" I cried, but something whispered back, its voice grating and sinister. "Join us." The shadows began to converge, the faces within the darkness contorting into grotesque forms, twisted in despair, their hollow eyes boring into mine, pulling at my very essence. With a surge of adrenaline, I scrambled to my feet, trying to climb back up the walls of the pit. Desperation propelled me as the shadows lunged forward, desperately trying to consume what little light I had left. "Guys!" I shouted again, my voice breaking as I clawed at the edges, grappling for a foothold. "Help me!" Suddenly, a hand reached down, grasping my wrist, pulling me upward with a jolt of strength. I was yanked from the clutches of darkness, thrown back on a solid ground, and I gasped, blinking at the faces of my friends. "What happened?" one friend asked, eyes wide, scanning the treetops and shadows that loomed around us. "I don't know," I gasped, breathless and trembling. But it felt like it wanted to take me, like it was calling to me. Tension crackled in the air as we glanced around, the forest now feeling too alive. Each rustle in the leaves felt like a breath from something hungry, impatient, beckoning. Suddenly, an overwhelming chill settled over us, a gust of wind that brought with it an unshakable sense of dread. The shadows thickened, intertwining with the whispers and transforming them into a cacophony of maddening sounds, turning the air electric with anxiety. "We need to keep moving," I said firmly, though my heart felt like it might explode. Each word felt weighed down by the half-formed fear gripping me. As we trudged further into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was trailing us, hovering just outside our view. I could sense the darkness creeping in, eager to reclaim what it had lost. An owl hooted low, sending goosebumps racing up my arms. Then suddenly, without warning, the air thickened again, heavy and oppressive. We stumbled as trees groaned around us, their branches bending unnaturally, reaching out as if to ensnare us. "This way!" I shouted, darting toward a path that seemed to open up ahead, the darkness swirling behind us. It felt like the shadows were alive, chasing us, laughing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But just as we reached the opening, the ground gave way, and the path ahead vanished into a gaping hole, a deep abyss framed by eerie whispers. A putrid scent wafted up, making my stomach churn. I skidded to a halt, heart racing as I barely avoided stumbling into the void. "What now?" my friend breathed, eyes wide with terror as they stared into the unknown. Panic clawed at me as I looked around, desperate for another way. But the oppressive darkness danced on the edges, waiting for us to falter. The trees closed in tighter, their branches intertwining, snaking like fingers ready to pull us into their grasp. In that moment, I felt a sharp chill crawl up my spine, an icy finger brushing against the back of my neck. I spun around, eyes wide, scanning the shadows. "We need to find another way," I urged, dread pooling in my stomach. But it was as if the forest held its breath. The wind died down, and the atmosphere grew thick with anticipation. "Something's coming," I whispered, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Dread washed over me like waves crashing against the shore as I glanced around, bracing for whatever nightmare was about to unfold. I could feel it stalking us, inching closer, and the oppressive silence that enveloped us felt like the calm before a storm. In the thick silence, whispers flooded my thoughts, echoing memories of fear, despair, and darkness. It was then I understood that this forest was alive, holding tight to the remnants of suffering. We had awakened something deep within, something complete and hungry. Just then, a shriek pierced the air, formulating around us, a chilling cry that echoed through the trees. And in that instant, I knew we were not alone. The darkness surged forward, a wave of despair crashing over us. Shadows whipped and roared like a tempest, eager to swallow us whole. We stumbled backward, instinct screaming for escape, but we were trapped, caught in a weave of roots and darkness, where the lines between the visible and the invisible blurred. "We have to go," I shouted again, retrieving the little courage left within me. But the shadows felt impenetrable, clawing at my mind, tempting me to submit to the fear. As we turned to flee, I could feel the cold grip of despair creeping toward us, and our frantic pace quickened, each breath quickening, until the sounds of the forest faded into hopeless whispers, eager for our surrender. It wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a dance with the darkness we had awakened, and whatever it was hungry for us. I could feel the shadows swirling around us, alive and creeping, their presence squeezing the very air from my lungs. The whispers grew louder, each syllable biting like frost on my skin, taunting my every step. I glanced back at my friends, their faces set with fear, eyes wide like saucers, mirroring my own rising dread. "We can't stop," I shouted, though my voice trembled. "We have to keep moving." But as I turned back, a chilling realization washed over me. The dark trees were not just swaying in the wind. They were shifting, moving in closer, as if forming a twisted maze that would capture us inside. I felt the heartbeat of the forest, a steady thrum vibrating through the ground, almost like it could sense our fear, feeding off of it. Stumbling forward, I could almost feel the tendrils of darkness reach for my ankles, trying to pull me back into the depths of despair. The whispers evolved into a haunting chant, weaving through the trees and into my mind. "Come play with us forever," the voices crooned, twisted and sweet, promising the allure of timelessness wrapped in darkness. "Shut up," I screamed, shaking my head, willing the voices out of my mind. With every step, I focused on the flicker of light that had guided us before, remembering the warmth that had come from the stone. It felt like a distant memory now, slipping further away with every second. "We need to find that light," I exclaimed out loud, as if speaking it might summon it back. My friends nodded, desperation mixing with tinges of hope, and we pressed onward, the suffocating shadows pushing against us. Just then, I tripped over a gnarled root and fell hard, scraping my palms on the ground. Damn it! I cursed, scrambling to get back up when something cold brushed against my neck, freezing me in place. It felt like a finger, light yet unyielding, sending chills cascading down my spine. I flinched, glancing over my shoulder, but saw nothing. The air felt thick, almost sticky, and panic flooded my chest. I was becoming unmoored, and the creeping sensations around us were amplifying, pulling me into something dark that begged to consume my sanity. Suddenly, a rustle echoed high above, branches skittering, followed by a shadow darting between the trees, too fast to identify. My heart raced, knowing instinctively we were not alone. My breath quickened as I turned sharply, looking at my friends, but the shadows swallowed their expressions, turning their worry into something primal. "Did you see that?" I whispered, barely able to form a coherent thought. "We can't stop for anything," a friend hissed back, but terror etched in their tone cut through the urgency. "Just keep moving." The path narrowed, the foliage closing in tighter. I could feel the forest breathing around us, a low rumble almost like a growl vibrating through the soles of my shoes. "It feels like it's alive," I murmured, barely thinking aloud. As if on cue, the shadows shifted, intertwining in the corners of my vision, drawing closer. Then, an unearthly howl erupted somewhere deep within the trees, a spine-chilling sound that sent shivers straight down my spine. Instinctively, I threw my hands over my ears, but the sound echoed inside my head, reverberating like a curse. "Go, go, go!" I yelled, urging everyone to run. We plunged down the narrowing path, breathless, hearts hammering against our chests like a war drum. The shadows lunged, grasping at our shirts, snagging at our hair as we ran faster. They seemed to take on form, a massive, swirling vortex of dark energy radiating anger and hunger, making the very ground beneath us quake. "Split up!" I shouted impulsively, my instincts screaming for survival. "We have to confuse it." In the chaos, we dashed in different directions, the darkness erupting behind us in a furious roar. I sprinted through the trees, branches clawing at my arms, as if trying to snatch me back. My breath came in ragged gasps, each step pounding against my resolve. But I could feel it, something stalking me, slipping through the twilight, twisting and looming just beyond my reach. It was relentless, the pressure of it weighing on me like an anchor, drawing me back into a suffocating gloom. I stumbled hard, hitting the ground again, biting my lip to stifle a cry. The forest went eerily silent, the rustling leaves hushed, as if even they held their breath for what came next. I pushed myself up slowly, pain flaring through my limbs as I surveyed my surroundings. "Anyone?" I called out weakly, dread clawing in my throat. No answer came. The shadows closed in tighter, black tendrils reaching toward me with an eerie lucidity, snaking their way through the underbrush. It felt like the forest was conspiring against me, drawing ever closer, consuming the light that had once given me hope. I searched desperately for my friends, but the darkness was overwhelming. And then I heard it again, the whispers, now just barely audible yet unmistakable. "Join us." It echoed across the trees, wrapping around me like a lover's embrace before turning icy. Panic surged again. "Get away from me!" I screamed into the suffocating air, stumbling backward. And that's when I felt it, a cold wind sweeping over me, carrying with it sharp, dark laughter. All around me, the shadows flickered and danced, feeding off my fear, their twisted forms looming, waiting for me to succumb. I felt myself teetering on the edge, terror and despair gnawing. Just when I thought I could do nothing but surrender, something clicked inside me. Instead of running, I stood my ground, fists clenched in defiance. "No!" I shouted into the void, willing myself to fight. The darkness hesitated, swirling uncertainly, as I squeezed my eyes shut, summoning every memory of light I had ever known. The warmth of the sun, laughter with friends, the love that grounded me. I refused to let the shadows take that from me. With a surge of adrenaline, I stretched out my hands toward the swirling dark, imagining a beacon of light glowing from my core. "You won't take me," I yelled, pulling every ounce of strength from every good moment I could muster. As if answering my defiance, a wave of warmth surged, and I felt the shadows around me recoil, shrinking back into the trees with a howl of fury. The air grew lighter, and the whispers turned desperate, retreating like a tide falling away. But just as triumph flickered in my mind, I caught sight of something horrid to my right, a figure lurking just within the trees. My heart nearly stopped. It was a face, a ghastly visage hovering in the shadows, grinning with malice, eyes as dark as night, yet glimmering with grotesque delight. "You can't escape," it rasped, voice like the scraping of nails against stone, wrapping around my thoughts, suffocating all hope. "We always know when you're lost, and we're hungry." I felt the world tilt, reality cracking around me. It was all too much, the deep chill within growing, wrapping tighter around my limbs, urging me to succumb. But inside that pool of darkness, a spark ignited, kindling all the courage I could muster. "No!" I gasped, planting my feet firmly, preparing to face the haunting presence. The shadows flickered around me, as if my defiance was a flame igniting the void. I focused on the light in my chest, willing it to explode, to push back the grotesque figure and reclaim the space it had stolen. "You're nothing but a whisper in the dark," I shouted, voice ringing with conviction. And just like that, I felt it shift. Light erupted from within, flooding the space, radiating warmth fierce enough to scorch the shadows, sending them spiraling back, unraveling the very fabric of despair threatening to drown me. But the figure sneered, anger twisting its features into something monstrous, and I could feel the air change, thickening as it lunged forward, grasping for me with clawed fingers, desperation in its wild gaze as it closed in. Then something inside snapped, unleashing every ounce of power the light held within me, transforming it into a radiant burst that shot out like lightning, illuminating everything as it collided. The forest convulsed, branches cracking and the ground shaking, like the darkness itself was screaming, flailing against the brilliance of purity and hope. And just as swiftly, everything fell into chaos. I could feel myself teetering on the edge of consciousness, vision flickering as radiant beams penetrated the shadows, carving a path through the oppressive gloom while the figure screeched, writhing with fury. As the light consumed the dark, I braced for impact, fighting to hold on, recognizing that this battle wasn't just my own. It was a struggle for every lost soul the darkness sought to claim. And then, with a deafening roar, the darkness seemed to dissolve, unfurling like smoke in front of an unrelenting flame, the laughter of despair fading into oblivion. But in that moment of clarity, I felt a lasting chill clawing at the edge of my understanding, a certainty that the darkness would always be there, waiting and watching. "Keep moving," I urged my weary friends, breaking free from the clutches of fear that had nearly consumed me. "This isn't over." With that heavy forewarning lingering, we forged ahead, the specter of darkness retreating into the depths of the forest from whence it came. But I could feel its presence. You could never fully escape the shadows, only delay its inevitable return. And with my heart still racing, I knew we had to stay vigilant because the darkness was always hungry, and it would be back, waiting for the next moment of weakness. The forest felt different now, heavy with a silence that seemed to cling to the air like fog. I glanced back at my friends, the light in my chest fading, but still pulsing with warmth. Each of us had a shared look, vulnerability chased by determination, not knowing what awaited us deeper in the woods. "We need to stick together," I said firmly. It was no longer just about escape, it was about survival. We slowly moved onward, every crack of a twig underfoot sending jolts of anxiety through me. As we ventured deeper, the trees closed in tighter, their twisted branches forming a natural cage that pressed down on us. The path ahead was one of suffocating darkness, and I felt eyes watching us from the shadows. Suddenly, a chill swept through, explosive and biting, making me shiver. A sense of impending doom settled over us, and the air thickened, nearly unbreathable. I could feel the shadows shifting, no longer retreating but coiling tighter, ready to pounce when we least expected it. "I don't like this," one of my friends whispered, glancing over her shoulder. I nodded, but the reassurance I tried to give didn't ease the dread pooling in my stomach. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but what lay behind was just as frightening as what lay ahead. Then, without warning, the whispers returned. They rolled in like a dark wave, wrapping around my mind, each word dripping with malice. "You shouldn't have come here. You're ours now." The echoes twisted through the trees, each syllable sharp and pointed, threatening to unravel my resolve. I clutched my head, trying to block out the sound, but it clawed deeper into my thoughts. "Make it stop!" I yelled, panic surging. The air felt alive, charged with an energy that seemed to laugh at my suffering. And that's when I noticed movement in my periphery. Dark figures darting just beyond the reach of my vision, slipping in and out of the shadows. I could see their shapes lurking, humanoid yet grotesque. Their features indistinct, but their intentions clear. "Did you see that?" I turned to my friends, but their faces were marred with fear. Panic rose within me, and the whispers turned to a cacophony of shrieks, rising higher and higher until it felt like the trees themselves were screaming. It was overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to snuff out all hope. I stumbled back, vision swimming, desperation clawing at my throat. "We have to leave. Now!" My voice echoed in the unnatural quiet as the shadows danced closer, flickering like flames eager to consume. Then, I heard it, a faint yet unmistakable sound of laughter, high-pitched and wicked. It skittered along the tree branches, a derisive cackle that called to the fearful child inside me, promising that it would never let go. In sheer panic, I ran, darting down a narrow path in the unpredictable gloom. I could hear my friends' hurried footsteps behind me, but I didn't stop to look. The darkness was closing in, and I could feel it nipping at my heels. Without warning, the ground dropped beneath me, and I tumbled into a small ravine, crashing down into the damp earth below. I gasped, gasping for air, disoriented as pain jolted through my side. "Guys!" I cried out, the echoes of my voice swallowed by the chasm around me. I blinked, adjusting to the darkness, and the nightmares began to shape themselves into something grotesque. Shadowy figures flitted around the edges, whispering, laughing softly, their forms ever shifting, creating a maddening spectacle of fear. My friends landed beside me, and the moment they stood, icy fingers reached out from the walls of the ravine, gripping at our ankles like the hands of the forlorn, longing for release. "This way!" I yelled, scrambling up the side of the ravine, but the soil crumbled beneath me. I slipped back down into the blackness, dread pooling in my stomach anew. I could hear my friend's labored breath behind me, the despair in the air tightening like a noose. We were trapped, encased in the earth, and I could feel the shadows pressing down, eager to suffocate. "Look!" one of my friends shouted, pointing to a dim light flickering far above. "Maybe we can reach it." Desperation flared within me, and instinct kicked in. We started climbing, hands grasping at the rough edges, pushing against the weight of darkness pressing in around us. But the more we struggled, the stronger the pull of shadows became, almost like they were angry at our effort to escape. The laughter rose again, swirling around us, an unsettling melody that urged us to fall back into despair. I gritted my teeth, refusing to succumb, feeling the tension in my limbs as I pulled harder, adrenaline and fear pushing me forward. Just as I thought I could grab hold of the edge, a freezing gust rushed past, nearly knocking me off balance. A dark form darted by, just beyond my sight, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. "Quick!" I ordered, urged by a primal instinct. "Don't stop." But as I pushed myself up, the ground beneath my hands shifted. An unseen force seemed to pull at my limbs, yanking me back down into the void. My heart raced as I fought against the terrifying pull, but it was all consuming. Then, a scream tore through the oppressive atmosphere. Not from me, but from one of my friends, a high-pitched wail that shattered the tense silence. I turned just in time to see him being dragged backward into the shadows, cold attachments wrapping tightly around his wrists while he flailed desperately. "Help me," he cried, panic lacing his voice. That cry struck something deep within me, igniting a fury born from fear and solidarity. I lunged forward, grabbing his arm, trying to pull him free, but the shadows were relentless, their grip tightening like iron chains. In that moment, I felt the weight of desperation settle heavily on my shoulders. I couldn't let him go. He was my friend, and I had dragged us into this nightmare. "Hold on," I shouted, pulling with everything I had. But as I fought against the darkness, I sensed eyes upon me, chilling and hungry. The shadows around us swirled and twisted, forming a hazy shape, a figure emerging, its laughter echoing in the void like a cruel wind. "You think you can fight me?" It hissed, its voice clawing at my mind, an unsettling symphony of dread and mockery. Suddenly, the air shifted. A sharp pain pierced through my side, causing me to stumble, losing my grip on my friend. "No!" I screamed, reaching out, but it was too late. The shadows tugged him in, laughter ringing in my ears as I watched him disappear, swallowed whole by the darkness. Panic flooded me. I was alone. The realization crashed over me like a wave. This darkness would stop at nothing to claim my soul. I refused to let despair take root, but my chest tightened under the weight of guilt and fear. With tears stinging my eyes, I stumbled back, determined to find a way out. Heavy shadows crept closer, and my breath quickened. I searched frantically for any sign of hope, and that's when I set sight on it. A glimmering object beneath the earth, something bright, something real. I scrambled toward it, clawing at the dirt, the light pulsating like a heartbeat, desperate to escape the darkness that enveloped me. As I grasped the object, a stone shone in my palm, radiant and warm, cutting through the cold despair. In that moment, the shadows recoiled, almost shrieking in agony as light poured forth, illuminating every corner of the pit. I could feel its power surge through me, choking off the whispers, banishing the darkness that threatened to engulf everything I held dear. But just as I thought victory was within reach, the figure emerged from the shadows, its face twisted in rage and fury, dark eyes blazing with intent and hatred. "You think that trinket will save you?" it snarled, leaning closer, its breath a cold wind that felt like death itself. I stood frozen for a moment, knowing I had to act. Clutching the stone tighter, I shouted, "Stay away from me!" The light exploded from within, radiating outward in a blinding wave, pushing back the encroaching darkness like a shield forged from courage and desperation. But as the figure writhed against the brilliance, I could see the darkness pooling around it, ready to reform, ready to strike again. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I could not let the darkness win. I took a deep breath, summoning the strength I had left, and shouted with all my might, "You will not take me. Not now." The stone pulsed, fueled by my defiance, forging a path of light that cleaved through the suffocating blackness. I felt it ripple through the ground, shaking the very air around me, the screams of the shadows intertwining with the echoes of my voice, reaching a crescendo that threatened to drown me. And just like that, as I faced the monstrous figure, I knew the fight wasn't just for myself anymore. It was for every soul buried in the darkness, for my friends, for anyone who had succumbed to the night. The shadows shrieked, swirling in a vortex around me, but I held my ground, heart pounding with resolve. I would show them I was not afraid. Taking one last breath, I flung the stone towards the swirling mass of darkness, its light slicing through it like a knife through flesh. For an instant, everything went quiet, a stillness before the storm. Then a thunderous roar erupted, echoing through the forest as the darkness shattered, pieces scattering into the air like ashes. As the spectral remnants flew apart, I felt my body being lifted, drawn upward, the forest releasing its grip on me. I soared toward the opening light, the warmth of hope flooding my spirit. But even as I rose, I felt the last echoes of that consuming darkness swirling in a distant corner of my mind, waiting, watching for another opportunity to strike. Emerging into the pale light of dusk, I gasped, collapsing to the ground, trembling. Around me lay my friends, all disoriented but alive, staring at the dimming sky above as if awakening from a nightmare. But I knew it wasn't over. The shadows would return, and together we would face them again, because the darkness would always hunger for the lost and the weak. And as I looked around, feeling the pulse of the warm light fading from my palm, I understood that this fight had awakened something inside me, a fire that would never extinguish, a battle spirit that would rise again and again until we defeated the darkness for good. As I lay there, catching my breath and gathering my thoughts, a deep unease settled back into my gut. The shadows hadn't been obliterated. They had simply retreated into the dark corners of the forest. I could still feel their presence, lurking, waiting, as if expecting our next move. I slowly stood up, shaking off the remnants of fear, and looked at my friends who were now sitting up, confusion mixing with the fear on their faces. "What just happened?" one of them asked, his voice trembling, eyes wide as if he'd seen a ghost. I struggled to find the words. We fought back, but it's not over. They will come for us again." My heart raced as the reality of our situation set in. We needed to find a way to escape, to get out of this forest before the darkness regrouped. We started moving together, trying to find a path that felt less suffocating. The trees seemed to close in again, branches twisting above us like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. Each step was filled with anticipation, the oppressive, quiet stretching between us like a taut wire ready to snap. "What happens if we find it again?" one friend asked tentatively, glancing into the shadows. "We stand and fight. We have to," I insisted, trying to sound braver than I felt. But doubt fluttered in my mind. Would we have enough strength left to face them again? Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted with a grating sound, like the groan of a slumbering beast awakening. I froze as a crack split the earth, a deep chasm opening slowly, pulling shards of soil into its abyss. "Get back!" I shouted, stepping away from the encroaching darkness just as tendrils of shadow crept toward us from the crack. I could feel their cold caress brushing against my ankles, hungry for more. "This way!" A friend grabbed my arm and urged me to a narrow path leading deeper into the underbrush, where the shadows were pooling thickly. I felt trepidation, but my instinct pushed me forward. We needed to find a way out. As we hurried through the dense thicket, the sound of rustling leaves filled the air, followed by faint, almost childlike giggles echoing in the distance. They were playful yet haunting, echoing through the trees like a siren's call beckoning us closer. I hesitated, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn back, but instead, I found myself moving toward the sound. Suddenly, the laughter stopped, replaced by an ominous silence that enveloped us. I could feel the weight of the forest pressing in, and my heart began to race. A chill ran down my spine as a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned to see something dart behind a nearby tree, too quick, too low to the ground to be anything familiar. I squinted into the twilight, my throat dry as I tried to make sense of the shadow that didn't belong. "Did you see that?" I whispered urgently, at the edge of panic. The others exchanged nervous glances, their eyes wide. No one answered. Without warning, the laughter returned, shrill and dissonant, echoing all around us, growing louder and more menacing. The giggles morphed into haunting cries, a mockery that seemed to swirl around us like wind, wrapping tighter and tighter until I could hardly breathe. "We need to move, now!" I commanded, electricity surging through my veins. We sprinted, panic driving our steps, desperately searching for an exit in the darkness. But every direction we turned, the shadows thickened, an unrelenting fog of dread threatening to engulf us at any moment. A snapping noise echoed behind us, sharp and close. I glanced back to see a dark figure slip effortlessly between the trees, its outline indistinct yet magnetic, drawing my attention like a moth to a flame. I stumbled, my foot catching on a root, and I fell to the ground. My heart pounded in my ears as I rolled to my back, gasping. Staring up at the trees, the shadows twisted into faces, nightmarish visages dancing in and out of view as if they were mocking my vulnerability. "Help!" I cried out, the word catching in my throat. Yet, the laughter only grew louder, ringing around me like a cruel choir. I glanced around, desperately searching for my friends. "I'm here! Over here!" One of them called, his voice strained, echoing through the chaos. Suddenly, I noticed the shadows swirling above him, a dark cloud forming, a roiling mass ready to drop down. Adrenaline surged through me as I pushed myself up, trying to run toward him, but two cold hands seized my wrists, pulling me back with an icy grip. In an instant, I was surrounded. The darkness whipped around me like a storm, silhouettes closing in, their dreadful whispers surrounding my thoughts, choking off any sense of reason. "You can't escape. You belong to us," they hissed, their voices a twisted symphony of despair. Fighting against the grip, I desperately searched for the stone I had clutched earlier. Heart racing, I realized it had slipped from my hand in the chaos, lost somewhere in the darkness. No time for regrets. I had to find a way to protect my friends. The shadows stirred closer, forming into monstrous shapes, ready to strike. I squeezed my eyes shut, summoning every shred of courage left within me. I couldn't let them take me. "Stop!" I shouted with every ounce of strength as I yanked my arms down, breaking free for just a moment. I could see my friend's face, stricken with terror as he was lifted slightly off his feet, dark tendrils wrapping around his body. Anguish coursed through me as I surged toward him. Each step felt like pushing through molasses, shadows wrapping tighter, pulling me down. But I refused to yield. Just as the darkness seemed to consume me, I felt something strange, a flicker of warmth, the echo of something brighter hidden beneath the gloom. It whispered to me in a comforting tone, a promise that I could overcome the dark. Believe in the light. I felt the surge coming from within, igniting in me a fiery determination. Reaching deep inside, I drew upon it, summoning a blinding glow that erupted from my core and washed over everything. Shadows recoiled, screeching, as I pushed with all my might. The faces twisted in agony as the warm light chased away the darkness that threatened to suffocate us. I could feel my friends grimacing with the strength of the light surging around us, breaking the oppressive grip of the void. But then, a shrill screech erupted from the heart of the darkness. Everything froze for a moment, and then the laughter resumed with a vengeance, louder and more furious as it ripped through the trees. "You think you can defy me?" It boomed, an echo deep with malevolence that rattled my bones. A figure emerged from the swirling shadows, much larger than before, menacing and powerful. Its eyes burned like coals, blazing with an ancient wrath, and it leaned closer, horrid features twisting into a grotesque smile. I felt the flicker of fear again, clawing at my confidence, a primal instinct warning me that this entity was not one to be trifled with. But the light within me surged again, filling me with new resolve. The shadows were powerful, yes, but I could not let them hold me down. Ignoring the fright creeping into my mind, I raised my hand, channeling the energy pulsing deep within, and hurled it toward the rising darkness. The radiant wave crashed into the shadow figure, illuminating the space around us, and the screech of rage echoed through the trees, shaking the very ground. The stench of decay filled the air as the shadows fought against the pure light, their form wavering like a cruel mirage caught in battle. For a moment, I thought we might win, but then, sensing the shift, the apparition threw back its head and laughed, a sound sharp as glass and deep as the abyss, causing the air to tremble. In seconds, it furiously advanced, the darkness swirling in torrents around us, ready to reclaim everything it had lost. We had won a moment, but the war was far from over. "We can't let it take us," I screamed, fear trembling my voice. "Fight! We have to fight!" But then a horrible realization sunk in. The shadows continued to swirl and plague our minds, keeping us trapped within a continuous nightmare. Despair began to creep in, that horrible weight pressing down even harder. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and we stumbled, grasping one another for support. The forest seemed alive, branches snapping and snapping like jagged bones, as the flora around us warped and twisted under the strain of the dark presence. "We need to get out of here," one of my friends shouted, trying to pull me away, but just as we turned to run, the shadow figure lurked low, blocking our way. The darkness spiked at us like barbed tendrils, and I could feel its intent to snuff out everything we held dear. To my horror, the laughter crescendoed, ragged and hissing, as it lunged toward us. "No!" I cried, casting another beam of light forward, but this time it felt weaker, flickering dangerously as doubt clouded my mind. Just then, an entire chorus of laughter erupted, vibrant yet chilling, and shadowy arms shot from the darkness, reaching toward my friends, their eyes wild with terror. I felt helpless, the shadows threatening to envelop us all once again. I had to find a way to break the cycle, to banish the fear and the darkness that choked at our every breath. "Help me!" I screamed into the void, my voice a raw echo, hoping against hope that there was still a way to turn the tide. And then I heard it, a whisper in my mind, faint yet unyielding. "Together, you can do this. You are not alone." The words surged through me, igniting a fire deep within. I locked eyes with my friends, and in that moment, we understood. Despite the chaos, despite the encroaching shadows, we were stronger together. "Hold on to me," I shouted, making my way to each of them, binding together our determination. With our hands clasped tight, we concentrated on the light, breathing together, pouring every ounce of courage into that glimmer within. I could feel the rush of energy building between us, pushing back against the darkness. As the shadows pulled, straining against our bond, they couldn't break us. Together we shouted, our voices united for the first time, a wave of defiance that reverberated through the gloom. "We are not afraid. The force of our collective will surge forth, a beam so bright it lit up the very fabric of the night." The dark figure shrieked, twisting and writhing, claws reaching out in futile anger. The shadows recoiled, a true retreat rather than a pause. For an eternal moment, as the light blazed, I felt hope blossom within me, pushing the chill of fear aside. But even as we began to win, another part of me couldn't shake the concern that we hadn't eliminated it yet. This foe was cunning and persistent, watching, waiting for our weakest moment. Yet here, now, we had power, and I would face whatever was needed to protect us. "Forward," I commanded, urging us through the remaining darkness as the shadows thinned out before us. We burst through the tree lean into the moonlight, our breaths mingling with sighs of relief. But the forest was not the same. The ground beneath us rippled, and the air itself vibrated with uncertainty and caution, warning us that while we might have escaped one nightmare, another was waiting just beyond the horizon. "It's not over," I murmured, scanning our surroundings, feeling the weight of unseen eyes lingering in the branches overhead. Shadows lurked just outside the moonbeam, whispering my name like a wicked lullaby, promising me that the darkness was always hungry. The battle had only just begun, and I knew we had to stay one step ahead, every moment brimming with uncertainty. I looked back at my friends, their expressions reflecting the gravity of the situation. "We need to keep moving. We can't stop now." So we pressed on, leaving the shadows behind, though I could feel their persistent gaze, a haunting reminder that they would not forget our fight. With every step, the whispers faded into the night like lost souls, but they carried with them a chilling premonition, a sign that victory could be fleeting. I fortified my resolve, pushing onward through the night, knowing deep within that I pressed onward through the forest, the moonlight casting eerie shadows across the uneven ground beneath my feet. As we trudged forward, I continually glanced back, half expecting to see that dark figure looming behind us again, its malevolence trailing like a stalker. The trees whispered warnings above us, their branches twisting like fingers reaching out to ensnare, their leaves rustling with a sinister sound that echoed in my mind. Suddenly, I felt it again, a sharp chill that sliced through the warmth of the night air. I paused, sending a worried look to my friends. They seemed to sense it too, their eyes darting around, breathing picking up as the atmosphere thickened with dread. "Do you hear that?" I asked in a hushed tone, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck bristle. Silence descended as we all strained to listen. The air felt heavy, almost electric, as if the forest was holding its breath. A soft sound, like a low mumble, rose and fell, wrapping around us like a cloak, words unrecognizable, yet smothering. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone, that something was observing our every move, hidden among the shadows. "We should keep moving," one friend suggested, anxiety creeping into their voice. "This place gives me the creeps," I nodded, nudging them along as we continued. But with each step, the oppressive atmosphere mounted. As we walked deeper, the darkness thickened until it felt like a tangible weight pressing against my skin. I swear I could see shapes flitting at the edge of my vision, moving just outside the flicker of our flashlights. We crossed a small clearing, and I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. The trees towered around us like sentinels, their gnarled branches twisted into grotesque shapes as if silently mocking us. Shadows pooled where the light couldn't reach, and my instincts screamed to turn back. Then, without warning, the laughter returned, that horrid, dissonant laughter echoing around us, ricocheting off the trees in gleeful mockery. I stumbled to a halt, heart pounding in my chest, terror gripping me tight. It was far too close now. "Stop! Just stop!" I shouted, my voice breaking as panic clawed at my throat. I could see my friends freeze, their faces paling, eyes wide with horror. From the depths of the darkness, a figure emerged, misty and formless at first, but then taking shape, a grotesque mimicry of a child, its eyes sunken into a shadowy face twisted with delight. It giggled, skipping toward us on nimble feet, but the sounds morphed into garbled murmurs, threatening to drown us in darkness once more. "It's playing with us," one friend murmured, backing away slowly. I felt their fear mingling with my own, and we began to inch back from the approaching figure, instinctively trying to escape. But it was relentless, its laughter rising as it pranced closer. I could see its mouth stretching impossibly wide, too wide for a normal being, revealing rows of jagged teeth that sparkled with an unnatural gleam. "Don't look at it! Don't listen!" I shouted, trying to focus my mind, to chase away the invading shadows. I felt the chill of the air wrap tighter around us, suffocating and cool. The stillness that followed the laughter was worse, an unsettling silence that hung in the air like a heavy fog, pressing down against our skin. Then, as if summoned by my fear, the shadows stretched, curling and writhing on the ground like serpents. They snaked toward us, grasping, pulling at our legs like icy fingers trying to drag us back into the gloom. I felt them brush against my ankles, a cold that seeped into my bones, and I screeched in horror, pulling away and urging my friends to run. In a frantic scramble, I turned to flee, only to stumble over something hidden in the dark, crashing to the ground. My flashlight rolled ahead of me, casting frantic beams against the trees before flickering out altogether, plunging me into total darkness. "Get up!" I heard someone scream from the distance, and panic surged through me. I pushed myself up, frantically patting the ground to find my flashlight, but the shadows enveloped me like a wave, devouring the last vestiges of light quickly. In that pitch black, I felt something cold and clammy grip my ankle. I gasped, heart racing as I jerked away, scrambling to regain my footing. I finally found my flashlight, but when I clicked it on, The beam fluttered weakly, illuminating nothing but thick shadows. "Hurry!" I shouted, looking around for my friends, but their voices were swallowed by the dark, fading into whispers that danced at the edges of my mind. I was completely alone now, swallowed by a suffocating darkness that felt alive, watching, waiting. I sprinted forward, pushing my way through the trees, branches snapping against my skin like icy talons. I felt my breath quicken, fear twisting tight in my chest as the laughter erupted again, surrounding me, drowning out my thoughts. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just laughter. It was alive, malicious and taunting, an echo of every fear I'd ever buried. I could sense it pressing down on me, filling my mind with despair, whispering thoughts that clawed desperately for release. "You can't escape," the shadows taunted, reverberating through my core, as if the forest itself mocked my plight. But I couldn't give in. Gathering what little courage I had left, I darted forward, weaving through the forest with my flashlight flickering, casting frantic beams in an attempt to find my way back to my friends. Then everything froze. I felt a jolt of realization as I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. An icy hand grasped my throat, tightening, choking off my voice. The figure was back, closer than ever, its eyes glowing with savage glee. I caught a glimpse of its vile grin, jagged and hungry. The thing wasn't playing at all. It was hungry, ready to consume. Panic surged, and I wrenched free, breaking into a sprint, my mind racing to find my friends. But no matter how fast I ran, it felt like I was moving in circles, the laughter dancing mockingly in my ears. Branches clawed at my skin as I burst from the tree-line, and I finally stumbled into an open area. A clearing of moonlight bathed the ground, but it felt wrong, cold as ice, as if I had entered a trap. "Where are you?" I whispered into the open space, hoping desperately to hear my friends call back. But the only response was the wind, whistling through the branches, slowly dying down. A deep sense of dread filled me as I scanned the surroundings. Enormous stones loomed in the clearing, oddly shaped and ancient, marking the perimeter like standing stones of a forgotten altar. I had heard tales of this place, a spot rumored to be cursed, where the veil between the realms had thinned. The laughter caught up to me again, insistent, as the shadows began to swirl at the edges of the clearing. I felt the presence drawing closer, coalescing into a figure of darkness, shimmering with malicious intent as the air thickened with its malevolence. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, pounding like a war drum. I had to confront it, had to fight off the shadows that threatened to close in. I scanned the ground around me, searching for anything, a stick, a stone, anything to wield against this suffocating force grasping for my soul. Then, in the dim light, I spotted something glinting just ahead, partially buried in the dirt beside one of the stones. With shaking hands, I scrambled toward it, tapping the surface gently until I uncovered an old dagger nestled among the roots. It was rusted and dull, ancient runes etched into the blade, shaking with an unfamiliar power. I gripped the hilt, feeling energy surge through me, a connection to the past sparking in my veins. This weapon felt alive, almost as if it had a purpose, like it had been waiting for someone to wield it against the darkness. Just as the shadows lunged toward me, I lifted the dagger high, channeling the energy pulsing from its core. "You will not take me," I shouted, summoning my strength as I prepared to fight, each word fueled by the burning need to protect my friends and reclaim our freedom. The air crackled with tension as darkness collided with the radiant light pouring from the ancient weapon. Shadows writhed and lashed, screeching against the light, trying to engulf it. I pressed forward, feeling the pulse of the dagger strengthen with every breath, illuminating the clearing like a sun against the night. Every inch felt like a battle, but with each swing, I felt the weight of shadows lifting, retreating, hissing in fury. But I knew it wasn't just the dagger. It was the connection I held with my friends, the bond we shared among the darkness. As the last echoes of shadow dissipated, A figure staggered from the depths, gasping for breath, their face pale and haunted. My heart skipped. "You're here!" I couldn't contain my relief, rushing towards them, the fear momentarily forgotten. But the moment of safety was short-lived, as a chill rushed through the clearing, the shadows retaliating, swirling back for one last assault. The darkness forming into shapes again, melting into the air like smoke before gathering at the edges. "This isn't over. We need to regroup," I shouted, turning back to face the gathered shadows, gripping the dagger tight. Together, we stood strong against the encroaching darkness, but I could feel the sinister pressure rising, ready to strike again. The ancient power of the dagger throbbed in my hand, its light fighting to ward off the shadows, but doubt thumped in my chest. Would we have enough strength this time? The trees whispered warnings around us as the darkness thickened, churning with a malevolence that felt almost tangible. I clenched my jaw, knowing I couldn't let the shadows drag us back into despair. "Together," I whispered, crossing my arms with my friends, each of us bracing for the inevitable. As the remaining shadows coalesced, I raised the dagger high, ready to fight, determined to create a barrier strong enough to shatter the darkness pressing against us once and for all. We could either vanquish this nightmare or become part of it, and I wasn't prepared to lose another moment. "Let's end this," I shouted with renewed vigor, each heartbeat echoing with determination, holding onto the flickering light of hope that refused to die. A duel between light and dark began, swirling shadows colliding with the ancient power of the dagger. And I knew whatever was waiting in the depths of those shadows would soon find out that fear could be transformed into an unbreakable force. The air crackled with tension as the dagger pulsed in my grip, its glow growing brighter as I drew on the energy we shared. I could feel my friends at my side, their dread mingling with determination. We held the line together, whispering encouragement as the dark mass twisted around us, shifting into nightmarish forms that lunged and recoiled, trying to absorb our light. I fixed my gaze on the heart of the darkness where the laughter erupted again, a cacophony of malicious delight that threatened to drown us. It echoed through the forest, mocking our fear, wrapping around my mind, pulling at the threads of my sanity. I squeezed the dagger, feeling its power resonate through my veins, and in that moment, I focused on what mattered, my friends and the hope of escape. Without thinking, I hurled the dagger into the heart of the darkness, watching as it pierced through shadow after shadow, silencing that cruel laughter. It felt liberating, like a lifeline casting away despair. The shadows writhed in fury, hissing, their forms collapsing in on themselves. But I knew instantly that it wasn't enough. The shadows were relentless, retreating only to regroup, their grasp still keenly focused on us. A chill swept through the clearing as the remaining shadows coalesced, forming into the very figure that had haunted us. It loomed larger now, its features sharpened into a grotesque face dripping with malice. It had been watching us, observing with patience, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Its grin was wide, and I could see its jagged teeth glistening under the pale moonlight. I gulped, stepping backward instinctively, but my feet were frozen. Each heartbeat thundered in my chest as I felt the energy in the air shift, a chill creeping in as a sense of dread coiled around my throat like a noose. The shadows flickered as if they were breathing, drawing closer, searching for weaknesses. The air was thick with despair, and I could taste it on my tongue, sour and cold. "We can't let it get to us," I shouted, shaking off the fear with a deep breath, my voice breaking the oppressive silence like glass. Suddenly, beams of light erupted from the dagger, illuminating the clearing. I could see the fear etched on my friends' faces mirrored within the shadows themselves. They hesitated, pulled between their instincts to flee and the power of our collective force. I felt their fear, felt the dark energy swirling around us, the way it clung like cobwebs, seeking to ensnare our minds. One of my friends, who had been quiet until now, suddenly began to tremble. "I can't do this," they gasped, clutching their head while their eyes darted frantically. "It's too much." Before I could reach out, The shadows seemed to pounce, pulling them down into the darkness as if they were being devoured. A scream tore from my lips, the sound echoing in the night, and I lunged forward, desperate to help. I could see the edges of my friend being dragged away, their form disappearing into a swirling black mass, swallowed by the very harbinger of despair we were trying to defeat. "No!" I yelled, reaching for them, but the darkness was slippery, pulling tighter around me, as if it wanted me too, a sweet promise of relief from the struggle. Fighting against the fear, I swung the dagger in a wide arc, sending a wave of light sprawling across the clearing. The shadows recoiled, hissing, but it wasn't enough to free my friend. I felt my heart twist in my chest as I sensed their dread mingling with my own, tinged with desperation. The shadows had hooked into their psyche, echoing their fears back at them as whispers that intertwined with my soul. "Fight it," I urged, hoping somehow my voice could reach through the suffocating fog. "We're here. You're not alone." The darkness around my friend shuddered, and for a second, I saw clarity in their eyes. But it flickered, wavering like a candle in a storm, and I knew I had to act quickly. The shadows were closing in, tightening their grip, and all I could do was brace myself for the fierce battle ahead. I stepped closer, feeling a surge of determination rising within me as the light from the dagger pulsed stronger. With every ounce of strength, I began to chant words that felt ancient, instinctual, knowing they were the key to breaking whatever hold the shadows had over us. As the echoes of my voice washed over my friend, the darkness began to waver, retreating just enough for me to see their fear-stricken face. A flicker of resolve ignited within me. This battle wasn't just physical, it was psychological, a war of wills. If I could lend them light, perhaps together we could dispel the shrouded figure looming in the depths. I prepared to strike again, when suddenly a deafening roar erupted from the shadows. The air quaked, and I stumbled as a shockwave slammed against me, shivering my bones. The shadowy figure writhed in rage, eyes blazing like molten coals as it surged forward, hurling tendrils of darkness meant to suffocate us. "Brace yourselves," I shouted, instinctively raising the dagger high and unleashing every ounce of power it contained. A blinding flash erupted, illuminating the clearing with a fierce light. The shadows screeched, recoiling, the laughter transforming into furious howls that echoed through the trees, sending birds spiraling from their nests into the inky night sky. My heart raced as the wave of energy radiated outward, raining down shards of light against the creeping mass. But the deeper darkness twisted with even more rage, and I felt an icy breath brush against my neck. "You think this will end?" "You belong to us," it hissed, the voice crackling like dry leaves underfoot. The words wormed their way into my thoughts, dredging up memories, regrets, failures that bubbled to the surface, their intent clear, to strip away every bit of courage I had left. For a moment, I faltered, the touch of vulnerability washing over me. But then I remembered what was at stake, the frightened faces of my friends, the bond we shared. I drew upon that connection, feeling the warmth flowing between us, steadier than any darkness could be. Together, I cried into the void, pouring my heart into the moment, reaffirming the strength that thrummed in our collective spirit. The shadows ricocheted against the light, screeching as if in pain, but the battle was far from over. The ground beneath us trembled as the figure gathered itself for another onslaught, all its fury focused on dismantling our resolve. Thick darkness seeped through the air, snaking toward my friends, tendrils reaching out with intention, intent on snuffing out our hope. "No, not this time," I screamed, focusing harder, calling upon the dagger's power. Suddenly, something shifted in my mind, the realization that the shadows could only hold power over us if we allowed it. With renewed determination, I hurled my consciousness ahead, directing the pure intent of our bond and the dagger's magic toward the core of the darkness. In an instant, a surge erupted, bright and fierce, each pulse resonating with our collective fear transformed into light. The shadows reeled, wailing in anguish as the wave crashed through their twisted forms like fiery arrows, piercing the veil of despair. The night lit up with a brilliant luminescence as the darkness began to unravel, the figure screaming as its form broke apart, scattering like ash on the wind. I felt the weight of dread lifting, a bright clarity shining through the murkiness. I could see my friend regaining their bearings, the tendrils loosening their grip as they began to rise again, fighting back against the shadows with every ounce of strength. "We can do this!" I chanted, feeling the energy of the forest surge around us. The laughter faded, replaced by anguished cries, melting into the cry of the wind, dissolving into the night as the remnants of that creature shrank back into the abyss. My heart raced as the clearing filled with warm light, illuminating the darkness that had once loomed over us like an ominous storm cloud. But I knew this wasn't the end, not yet. The forest around us shivered, a final warning mouthful of shadows streaming away into the depths, promising to return. We had pushed back the darkness for now, but I could feel it lurking in the corners, waiting for another chance. Grasping the dagger, I looked at my friends. We had survived this encounter. "We need to keep moving," I urged, my voice steady despite the foreboding shadows lingering, readying themselves to regroup. Together, we affirmed, uniting in our fear but fueled by our resolve. As we made our way through the silver-lit clearing, I could sense the peace waning, that underlying tension still palpable, beautiful moonlight blending with the forsaken shadows. The atmosphere changed, the woods seeming to breathe deep, preparing itself for whatever came next, and I understood then that the fight was not just about survival. It was a battle for our very souls, a never-ending cycle until the light broke through once more. As we stepped away from the clearing, shadows still clung to the edges of my vision, a constant reminder of how close we had come to losing everything. We moved as a tight-knit group, breathing heavily, hearts racing, and maintaining that unbreakable resolve. The air was thick with unease, each rustle in the leaves sending a shiver down my spine. We all felt it, the lingering presence of something dark, like a predator stalking us just out of sight. The deeper we wandered into the woods, the more the atmosphere shifted. The moonlight that once provided comfort now cast long, claw-like shadows that reached out toward us, as if to pull us back into that horror. I clutched the dagger, its energy pulsing faintly in my palm, almost like a heartbeat, reminding me that I wasn't just holding a weapon, but a lifeline. Then one of my friends stumbled, the ground beneath giving way to a hidden root, and everyone froze. A chilling howl echoed through the trees, a sound that felt like a warning. My blood turned to ice as a mass of dark smoke began to form around us again, rising from the forest floor like a thick fog. It swept through the trees, engulfing everything in a suffocating embrace, tainting the air with a metallic, bitter scent. "Run!" I screamed, knowing we couldn't afford another confrontation. We were still reeling from the last one, and I could feel the weariness heavy in my bones. Every fiber in my being screamed to escape as the shadows twisted into shapes, grotesque images that hinted at everything we feared most. Faces of doubt and despair swirled around us, menacingly close, whispering our names with a chilling cadence, trying to burrow into our minds. Panic surged through me, pushing me to sprint. I didn't look back, but I could feel the darkness clawing at my heels, unrelenting in its pursuit. My breaths came in sharp rasps as adrenaline coursed through my veins, the dagger glowing ever so slightly, reminding me of our shared fight. I could hear my friends behind me, their footsteps quickening, their own fears palpable in the cold air. We were all driven by the same instinct, the need to survive. We found ourselves at the edge of a cliff, a sheer drop into darkness below, the shadows still swirling menacingly around us, searching for ways to ensnare us. My heart raced, but I knew we had to leap of faith. It was either that or remain where the darkness could surely swallow us whole. We stood at the precipice, breathless, hearts thundering in unison, glancing at one another as if hoping someone would take the first step. We jumped together, I urged, and they nodded, determination blazing in their eyes. In that split second, we joined hands and leaped over the edge, hurtling into the unknown. As I fell, a rush of cold air surrounded me, and I felt weightless, as if suspended in time. I whispered a silent prayer, clenching the dagger tight, wishing for it to guide us through the darkness. Suddenly, I landed softly on cool grass, an unexpected miracle that took me by surprise. I looked around, and the unsettling night was replaced by a serene meadow bathed in starlight. There were no shadows, no dark figure lurking in the depths, just an overwhelming calm that hung in the air like a promise. But as glimpses of relief flickered, I noticed my friends were not beside me. Panic surged anew, and I called out their names, but only my voice answered back, swallowed by the silence. This was the terrifying twist. I was alone again, left to face whatever horrors might come my way in this strange, ethereal place. I stumbled through the grass, heart racing, searching for signs of my friends. The silence pressed in heavily, and I could feel the very essence of the night wrapping around me, calling me back into the dark embrace I had just escaped. Then, as if on cue, shadows began creeping back into the edges of my vision, swirling darker and thicker than before, consuming the pale light of the stars. The witching hour had come again. Everything around me darkened. Unsettling whispers began to echo through the meadow, reminding me of my fear. Greedy voices taunting me, making promises of what could have been. I realized then that the shadows were never truly gone. They had merely retreated, waiting for a moment of weakness. With a heaviness in my chest, I understood. The fight was not just physical. It was a battle against the demons within me. Gathering my resolve, I clutched the dagger against my chest. It still pulsed with the life force of our bond. That connection we forged in the darkness together gave me strength. I shouted to the void, proclaiming my resilience against the shadows that wanted to take hold once more. I will not be consumed by you. I am not afraid. My voice rang out, echoing against the waves of darkness, filling me with a glow of defiance. With that, I felt a warmth envelop me, a tingling surge as the dagger vibrated with an intensity one had never felt before. The meadow erupted in light, forcing the shadows to retreat, their voices turning to screams that faded away into the night. My friends' presence flickered back to me, and I sensed them nearby, remnants of their energy still lingering like threads in the fabric of this realm. But I had to keep moving. I couldn't linger in this fleeting moment of peace. Glancing back towards the shadows, I realized that they did not simply vanish. Instead, they would seek another chance, another darkness to wrap around. I had survived this time, but there was no telling what lurked beyond the horizon, an eternal struggle between light and dark that was bound to continue. Determined, I turned away from the whispering void, the echoes fading rapidly behind me, and began my journey deeper into the meadow, hoping to find a way back to my friends, a path that would lead us to safety. I could feel the pulse of the dagger steadying, a guide through the uncertainty. Each step I took felt like a statement of purpose, a silent vow to confront whatever awaited us. As I moved forward, I vowed that next time we would face the darkness together, and when the shadows returned, we would stand united, not just as people battling a force, but as friends intertwined, determined to shine through the night.